Grandpa, take this and hide it. Please don't let Daddy see. The cheap plastic police car felt insignificant in my calloused hand, just $5 worth of molded plastic made in China. But later that night, when the house was silent and the shadows stretched long across the floorboards, I pressed the tiny red button underneath the chassis. The voice I heard froze the blood in my veins. It was not a siren. It was my son-in-law planning my murder. Within 10 minutes, I was packing my bags. Within 20, I was gone. My name is Elijah Robinson, and this is how a toy saved my life and destroyed the monsters I called family. Before we begin, let me know in the comments if you have ever trusted the wrong person in your own home. Like and subscribe if you believe justice is best served cold. The roast beef was dry, but the conversation at the dinner table was even drier. I sat at the head of the mahogany table, a piece of furniture I had carved with my own hands 30 years ago. Yet tonight, I felt like a trespasser in my own kingdom. Gavin, my son-in-law, wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, his pale blue eyes scanning the room with the arrogance of a landlord inspecting a tenement. He did not look at me. He looked through me. You know, Elijah, Gavin said, dropping my name with a deliberate lack of respect that always made my jaw tighten. I was reading an article today about assisted living facilities. They have some great ones upstate, really top-tier stuff. They specialize in cases like yours, cases like mine. I asked, my voice steady, though my grip on the fork tightened. I am a retired structural engineer, Gavin, not an invalid. I built the foundation of this house while you were still learning to tie your shoelaces. Gavin chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. He took a sip of the expensive wine he had bought with my credit card. Come on, old-timer. Let's be realistic. You are 69. You are slowing down. I saw you stumble on the stairs yesterday. This big house with all its stairs and sharp corners is a death trap for someone of your demographic. You know how it is. Bones get brittle, balance goes. I looked at my daughter Jasmine. She was pushing peas around her plate, refusing to meet my gaze. She looked tired, worn down by the constant drip of her husband's poison. Jasmine, I said softly, do you think I belong in a home? She flinched. Daddy, it is not like that. Gavin just worries about your safety. We just want what is best for you. Safe. I looked back at Gavin. His smile was thin, sharp, like a razor blade hidden in an apple. He was not worried about my safety. He was worried about how long it would take for me to die so he could sell this property. The land alone was worth $2 million thanks to the gentrification that I had foreseen 2 decades ago. I excused myself from the table, leaving my half-eaten meal. As I walked to the stairs, I paused at the bottom landing. My hand brushed the oak banister. It wobbled. Just a fraction of an inch, but to a man who spent 40 years calculating load-bearing ratios and stress fractures, it screamed a warning. I had installed this banister myself using half-inch lag bolts anchored into the studs. It would take a sledgehammer to loosen it, or a wrench used deliberately. I looked up. Gavin was watching me from the dining room doorway. His eyes were cold, calculating, waiting. I pretended not to notice the wobble. I gripped the rail, feigning the weakness he wanted to see, and hauled myself up the stairs, my heart pounding a rhythm of war. I retreated to my study, the one room in the house that still felt like mine. The walls were lined with blueprints and framed patents, remnants of a life spent building things that endured storms. I sat in my leather armchair, listening to the muffled sounds of Gavin berating Jasmine downstairs. He spoke to her the way one speaks to a slow child, demeaning and cruel. The door creaked open. It was Leo, my 7-year-old grandson. He was wearing his pajamas, his eyes wide and fearful. He looked over his shoulder, checking the hallway before slipping inside and closing the door softly. "Grandpa," he whispered. "Leo, what are you doing up?" "It is past your bedtime." He ran to me and climbed onto my lap, burying his face in my chest. I smelled his shampoo, the scent of innocence that was slowly being eroded in this house of lies. He reached into his pajama pocket and pulled out a small black and white police car. It was one of those cheap toys you buy at a gas station, the kind with flashing lights and noisy sirens. "Here, Grandpa," he said, shoving it into my hand. "Keep this. Don't lose it." I looked at the toy confused. "Thank you, Leo. But you love this car. Why are you giving it to me?" "Because Daddy said to throw it away," Leo whispered, his voice trembling. "He found it under the sofa in the living room. He got really mad. He said it hears things. He said if I did not throw it in the trash, he would take away my tablet for a month. But I did not want to throw it away. It is my favorite." He looked up at me, his eyes filling with tears. "Daddy is scary when he talks on the phone, Grandpa. He says bad words. He says mean things about you." My stomach churned. "What kind of things, Leo?" He says you are taking too long. He says he needs the money. I pulled my grandson closer, stroking his hair. Listen to me, Leo. You did the right thing giving this to me. I will keep it safe. Now you go back to bed. Do not tell your dad you came in here. Okay. He nodded, slid off my lap and vanished back into the shadows of the hallway. I looked at the car in my hand. It seemed ordinary enough. I turned it over. There was a switch on the bottom labeled Demo and Record. It was a toy that allowed kids to record their own voice to play back through the siren speaker. A novelty. But the switch was set to record. I waited until the house was completely silent, until the heavy footsteps of my son-in-law had ceased overhead and the lights downstairs were extinguished. The clock on my desk read 2:15 in the morning. I sat in the darkness, illuminated only by the street lamp outside my window. I pressed the play button. The audio was grainy, accompanied by the static of fabric, likely because the car had been wedged under the sofa cushions. But the voices were unmistakable. I am telling you, Mike, I need more time. It was Gavin. His voice was not the smooth, condescending tone he used at dinner. It was frantic, desperate. Then a pause as the person on the other end spoke. I could not hear them, but Gavin's reply filled in the blanks. Yeah, I know the deadline is Friday. I know what happens if I don't pay. But the old man is stubborn. He is healthy as a horse. I tried the pills, but he barely sleeps. My hand shook. He had been drugging me. The fatigue, the brain fog I had felt for weeks, it wasn't age, it was chemistry. Then I heard Jasmine's voice in the background, muffled and weak. Gavin, please stop shouting, he might hear you. Shut up, Jasmine, Gavin snapped. If your father had the decency to drop dead, we would not be in this mess. This house is sitting on a gold mine and he is just occupying space, but don't worry, I fixed the problem. What did you do? Jasmine asked, her voice trembling. I loosened the railing on the main landing. Gavin said, his voice dropping to a sinister hiss. Just enough. He is heavy. If he leans on it tomorrow morning, it will give way. A fall from that height at his age. Neck snap or hip fracture. Either way, he ends up in the hospital and never comes out. We get power of attorney by Monday. We sell the house by Friday. I heard a gasp on the recording, then Gavin again. Don't look at me like that. Do you want to be homeless? Do you want those guys coming for us? For Leo, it is him or us, Jasmine. And frankly, I am sick of living with that arrogant old man. He thinks he is better than me just because he has a degree. He is nothing. Just another lucky token who got above his station. The recording ended with a click. I sat there in the dark, the silence of the room pressing against my eardrums. My heart was not racing. It had slowed down to a cold, deliberate thud. This was the calm I had known in the army 40 years ago, the calm before the ambush. He had loosened the railing. He intended to kill me in the morning. I stood up and walked to the door. I checked the lock. Then I went to my closet. I did not turn on the light. I did not need to. I knew where everything was. I pulled out my old duffel bag. I did not pack clothes. Clothes were replaceable. I packed my passport, my birth certificate, the deed to the property which I kept in a fireproof box, and my medication. I went to the safe hidden behind the bookshelf. Gavin thought he was smart, but he was lazy. He had never bothered to check if the old man had secrets. I opened the safe and took out the hard drive containing my patent filings and the encrypted ledger of my offshore accounts. I also took the cash I kept for emergencies, $5,000 in small bills. I moved to the desk and wrote a note. My hand was steady. Gone fishing for a few days. Don't worry about the railing. I noticed it was loose. I will call a contractor when I get back. It was a lie, but it was a specific lie. It told him I knew about the railing, but it did not tell him I knew about the murder plot. It would buy me time. It would make him panic, but it would also make him hesitate. If he thought I just went on a trip, he might try to find me. If he knew I was running to the police, he would destroy evidence. I needed him to feel safe enough to make a mistake. I looked at the toy car. I wrapped it carefully in a handkerchief and placed it deep inside my jacket pocket. This was my weapon. This $5 piece of plastic was the nail in his coffin. I opened the window. The drop to the garden was only 10 feet. I had built the trellis against the wall for my late wife's roses, and I knew it would hold my weight. I was 69, not 90. I was fit. I climbed out into the cool night air, my boots finding purchase on the wood I had treated myself. I landed softly on the grass. I looked up at the house one last time. It was a beautiful structure, a testament to my life's work. But tonight it was a tomb, and I was the corpse that had decided to walk away. I walked 3 miles to the nearest 24-hour diner, called a cab from a burner phone I bought at the convenience store, and headed to the city. I did not go to the police yet. The police would take a report, they would investigate, but Gavin was slippery. He would claim it was a misunderstanding, he would claim the recording was taken out of context, he would lawyer up. No, I needed more than an arrest. I needed to dismantle him. I needed to crush him so completely that he would never threaten my grandson again. As I sat in the back of the cab watching the city lights blur past, I formulated the plan. Gavin wanted my money, he wanted my house, he wanted control. I was going to give him exactly what he wanted, and it was going to choke him. The game had changed. The prey had just become the hunter. I woke up to the smell of industrial cleaner and stale coffee in a cheap hotel room on the outskirts of the city. The sheets were scratchy and the mattress sagged in the middle, but for the first time in months I had slept without the chemical fog of sedatives clouding my brain. I sat up and checked my watch. It was 9 in the morning. Back at the house on Maple Street, the scene would be unfolding exactly as I had calculated. Gavin would have woken up first. He would have walked down the hallway, his footsteps heavy with anticipation, expecting to see the ambulance lights flashing in the driveway, or perhaps my broken body sprawled at the bottom of the stairs. He would have looked at that loose banister, the trap he had set with such malicious care, and found it untouched. I imagined him pushing open my bedroom door, expecting to find a confused old man or a corpse. Instead, he found a made bed. He found an empty closet, and on the pillow, he found the note. Gone fishing. The panic would not have set in immediately. At first it would have been confusion, then anger, but the real terror would have arrived when he went to the safe in the study. I could picture him frantically spinning the dial, his hands sweating as he realized the combination didn't work because I had reset it 3 years ago. He would have broken it open eventually with a crowbar, perhaps only to find it empty. The deed to the house was gone. The patent documents were gone. But most importantly, the power of attorney forms, the ones he had been badgering me to sign for weeks, were nowhere to be found. Without those papers, he could not sell the house. Without those papers, he could not refinance the mortgage he had already taken out fraudulently in my name. He was standing in a $2 million house that he could not touch. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Jasmine. I let it ring. Then Gavin. I let it ring. They called 12 times in 10 minutes. They were not calling to check if I was safe. They were calling because their financial lifeline had just cut itself. They were calling because they were drowning. I stood up and walked to the small desk by the window. I opened my laptop and connected to the hotel's secure network. It was time to execute the next phase. I logged into my primary bank account. For years, I had allowed Jasmine to be a signatory on my checking account. I told her it was to teach her responsibility. In reality, it was a test she had failed miserably. I dialed the number for the private wealth management division of my bank. I did not call the general hotline. I called the direct line of Mr. Henderson, a man who had managed my patent royalties for 20 years, Elijah. Mr. Henderson said, his voice warm but professional. "It is good to hear from you. To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I need to initiate Protocol Obsidian," I said. My voice was calm, cold, and devoid of hesitation. There was a pause on the other end. Protocol Obsidian was a safeguard we had established a decade ago. It was the nuclear option. It meant a total lockdown of all assets due to suspected family fraud or compromised security. "Are you sure, Elijah?" Mr. Henderson asked. "This will freeze everything: joint accounts, credit cards, authorized user privileges. It will trigger a fraud investigation on all transactions from the last 24 hours. "I am sure," I replied. "Do it." And Henderson flagged the secondary credit card ending in 4589. "The one Gavin carries. Mark it as stolen." "Done," Mr. Henderson said. "Is there anything else?" "Yes. I want a full audit of all withdrawals made in the last 6 months sent to my secure email, and notify security at the main branch that no one other than myself is to access my safe deposit box. Not even with a signed letter." "Understood. Stay safe, Elijah." I hung up. I felt a grim satisfaction. I had built bridges that spanned raging rivers. I had designed skyscrapers that withstood earthquakes. Dismantling Gavin's financial stability was a simple engineering problem. I just had to remove the load-bearing walls. Across town at that very moment, Gavin was walking into Le Jardin. It was a French bistro where a salad cost more than my weekly grocery bill. He was meeting with 2 men. I knew this because I had synced his digital calendar to my tablet months ago when he left his phone unlocked. The calendar entry read simply Investors Lunch. But these were not investors. I had looked up their names. They were hard money lenders, loan sharks in Italian suits, men who lent money against assets that traditional banks would not touch. Gavin was there to promise them my house. He was there to tell them that the old man was out of the picture and the sale would proceed by Friday. I closed my eyes and visualized the scene. Gavin would be charming. He would be ordering the most expensive bottle of wine. He would be laughing that loud fake laugh of his trying to project confidence. He would slide the corporate credit card, the one attached to my account, across the table to pay for the meal. It was his power move. It showed he had access to resources. I checked the time, 12:30. The transaction would be happening right about now. I refreshed my banking app. A notification popped up in red. Transaction declined. Le Jardin. Amount $450. I smiled. Gavin would frown. He would tell the waiter to try again. He would blame the chip. He would blame the machine. The waiter would try again. Declined. Reported stolen. The waiter would have to cut the card. He would have to do it right there at the table in front of the two men who were already suspicious of Gavin's promises. Gavin would turn red. He would sweat. He would fumble for his own personal debit card, the one linked to his empty personal account. That would decline too. The loan sharks would look at each other. They would stand up. They would not pay for the lunch. They would leave Gavin there with the bill and a very clear message that his time was running out. He had humiliated me in my own home for years. Today, I had humiliated him in front of the people he feared most. My burner phone rang again. It was Gavin. This time I answered. "Hello, Gavin," I said. "Where the hell are you, old man?" Gavin screamed. His voice was raw, shaking with rage. The background noise sounded like he was on the street, probably pacing outside the restaurant after being kicked out. "I told you, Gavin. I went fishing." "Don't play games with me," Gavin hissed. "My card stopped working. The bank said you reported it stolen. You need to call them back right now and fix this. Do you hear me? Right now." "I heard you, Gavin, but I think you are confused. That card is for emergency use only. A $400 lunch does not look like an emergency." "Listen to me, you ungrateful piece of trash." Gavin lowered his voice, his tone dropping into that menacing register he used when he thought no one was listening. "You think you are smart. You think you can just walk away. You have no idea who you are dealing with. I have people looking for you, and when they find you, they are going to put you in a hole so deep no one will ever find you." "Is that right?" I asked. "Like the hole you planned for me at the bottom of the stairs?" There was a silence on the line. A heavy-loaded silence. He knew. He knew that I knew. "I don't know what you are talking about," Gavin said, but his confidence wavered. "You are senile. You are imagining things. That is what I am going to tell the police. I am going to tell them you are off your meds. I am going to tell them you are a danger to yourself and others. They will put out a silver alert, Elijah. They will hunt you down like a lost dog and bring you back to me. And when you get back, I will make sure you never leave that room again." I tightened my grip on the phone. This was it. The mask was completely off. He was not just a greedy son-in-law. He was a predator. "You can tell them whatever you want, Gavin," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "But remember one thing. I built that house. I know every nail, every wire, and every secret. You are living in my world, boy. And I just turned off the lights. What about Leo?" Gavin sneered. "You left your grandson behind. You think I am going to let him go to school tomorrow? You think I am going to let you see him again? You abandoned him." The mention of Leo hit me like a physical blow. He was using the boy as a pawn. "If you touch a hair on his head, Gavin, I will not call the police. I will come back there and I will dismantle you piece by piece." Empty threats from a lonely old man. Gavin laughed. "You are done, Elijah. Come home and sign the papers. Or die in the street. It makes no difference to me." I hung up. My hand was shaking not from fear, but from a cold, focused fury. He had threatened Leo. He had crossed the final line. I took the back off the cheap burner phone and pulled out the battery. I removed the SIM card and snapped it in half with my thumb. I dropped the pieces into the trash can by the desk. He thought I was running. He thought I was hiding in fear. He was wrong. I was not hiding. I was preparing. I opened my laptop again. I pulled up the schematics for the house on Maple Street. I zoomed in on the ventilation system. I knew sound carried through those ducts. I knew where the blind spots were in the security system because I had installed it. Gavin wanted a war. He wanted to use the law against me. He wanted to use my age against me. He wanted to paint a narrative of a senile old man losing his mind. Fine. I would let him paint that picture. I would let him believe he was winning. I would let him drag the police into this. Because the more he struggled, the tighter the net would become. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder Marshall, my lawyer, had prepared years ago. It contained the original deed to the land, but it also contained something else. A document detailing the zoning rights for the entire neighborhood. Rights that I retained. Gavin was trying to sell a house. He did not realize that I owned the ground it stood on. I picked up the hotel phone and dialed a number I had memorized. "Marshall," I said when he answered. "Elijah. It has been a while. It has. Listen to me carefully. Initiate the asset freeze. And Marshall, get ready. I am going to need you to represent a client who is about to be accused of being criminally insane." Marshall laughed a deep, booming sound. "What did you do, Elijah?" "I just declared war," I said. "And Marshall, I am going to need a car, not a rental. Something fast, and something invisible." I hung up the phone. I walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Gavin was panicking. He was calling his lawyer. He was calling the police. He was spinning his web of lies. Let him spin. I was the spider, and he had just walked into the center of the web. The engine of the gray sedan hummed a low, steady rhythm as I merged onto the interstate. Marshall had come through as always, delivering a vehicle that was powerful yet utterly forgettable. It was a ghost car for a man who was supposed to be invisible. I kept the speedometer exactly at the limit, my eyes scanning the mirrors, not for traffic but for the law. I turned on the radio, hoping for news traffic, anything to drown out the voice of my son-in-law that was still echoing in my head. The music cut out abruptly, replaced by the jarring three-tone screech of the emergency alert system. My stomach tightened. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning the color of ash. The robotic voice of the announcer filled the cabin. "Be on the lookout. Silver alert issued for Elijah Robinson, black male, 69 years old, 6 feet 2 inches, last seen in the West Side District. Subject suffers from advanced Alzheimer's disease and paranoid delusions. He is believed to be confused and may be a danger to himself and others. Family reports he may be in possession of a firearm. If seen, do not approach. Call 911 immediately. A firearm." Gavin had not just reported me missing, he had painted a target on my back. He knew I did not own a gun. I had never owned a gun in my life. I was a man of mathematics, of precision, of construction. I abhorred chaos. But Gavin knew the climate. He knew exactly what keywords to feed the dispatcher to ensure that any police encounter would escalate instantly. An armed, confused black man in America did not get taken to a hospital. He got taken to the morgue. This was his play. He did not want me found. He wanted me eliminated. If the police shot me, he would play the grieving son-in-law, telling the cameras how he tried so hard to save me from my own deteriorating mind. He would sue the department, settle out of court, and use the money to pay off his loan sharks. It was efficient. It was brutal. And it was terrifyingly smart. I looked at the passing cars. Every driver was a potential informant. Every phone could be dialing 911 right now. I was not Elijah Robinson, the retired engineer, anymore. I was a fugitive in my own city, hunted by the very system I had paid taxes to for 50 years. My chest constricted. I thought of the pills Gavin had been feeding me, the sedatives. If they were still in my system, if my hand shook or my speech slurred during a stop, it would confirm his narrative. I grabbed a bottle of water from the passenger seat and downed half of it, trying to flush my system, trying to sharpen my focus. I needed to be clearer than I had ever been. Then I saw them. Blue lights flashing in the rearview mirror, a state trooper cruiser cutting through traffic, closing the distance with predatory speed. I did not panic. Panic was a luxury I could not afford. I signaled. I pulled over to the shoulder. I put the car in park. I rolled down all 4 windows so the officer could see the interior was empty. I turned off the engine and placed my keys on the dashboard. Then I placed my hands on the top of the steering wheel, fingers spread wide, 10 and 2. The cruiser stopped behind me. I watched in the side mirror as the officer stepped out. He was young white, his hand resting heavily on his holster. He did not approach the window immediately. He stood by his door, assessing the threat Gavin had fabricated. "Driver," he shouted over the traffic noise. "Step out of the vehicle. Keep your hands where I can see them. Do not make any sudden moves." I opened the door slowly, using the external handle. I stepped out. My movements deliberate and fluid. I raised my hands, showing my empty palms. The wind whipped my jacket, but I stood tall. I was not a confused old man. I was a structural engineer standing on a foundation of truth. "Walk backwards toward my voice," the officer commanded. I complied. 1 step, 2 steps. "Stop. Get on your knees. Hands behind your head." The asphalt was cold and rough against my knees. It bit into my skin, a sharp reminder of the reality of my situation. I interlaced my fingers behind my head. The officer approached cautiously. I felt the cold steel of handcuffs click onto my right wrist, then my left. He hauled me up not gently and pushed me against the hood of his cruiser. "You fit the description of a Silver Alert subject," the officer said, patting me down roughly. "Where is the weapon?" "There is no weapon, officer," I said, my voice calm, steady, and devoid of the confusion he expected. "My name is Elijah Robinson. I am fully conscious of who I am and where I am. I am not armed. I am a victim of a false police report filed by a man attempting to defraud me." The officer paused, his hand freezing near my jacket pocket. He spun me around. He looked into my eyes, searching for the glazed look of dementia. He found only the steel gaze of a man who had built skyscrapers. My son-in-law, Gavin Vance, filed that report. I continued maintaining eye contact. "He claims I have dementia. He claims I am armed. He did this because I discovered he was poisoning me to steal my property." "That is a hell of a story," the officer said, but his grip on my arm loosened slightly. "But the alert says you are a danger to yourself. I have to take you in for a psychological evaluation. It is protocol. Officer, in my front jacket pocket there is a folded document. Please take it out. Read it." He hesitated, then reached into my pocket. He pulled out the paper I had secured just hours ago from Dr. Eris, a specialist Marshall had sent me to before I left the city. It was a certificate of mental competency dated today, time-stamped 8:30 in the morning. It stated clearly that I was oriented, lucid, and suffering from no cognitive decline. "Read the timestamp," I said. "That evaluation was conducted 4 hours ago. Does a man with advanced dementia suddenly recover in 4 hours to pass a competency hearing?" The officer looked at the paper, then back at me. He was frowning. The narrative in his head was cracking. Now I said, "Check my phone. It is in the other pocket. Unlock code is 1954. Open the voice memo app. Play the last recording." He pulled out the phone. He punched in the code. He pressed play. Gavin's voice, tinny but unmistakable, drifted from the speaker. If the old man had the decency to drop dead, we would not be in this mess. I loosened the railing. Neck snap or hip fracture. Either way, he ends up in the hospital and never comes out. The officer stopped the recording. The silence stretched between us, heavy and thick. The traffic rushing by seemed to fade into the background. He looked at the handcuffs on my wrists, then at the medical paper in his hand. He realized he had been used. He realized he was a pawn in Gavin's game. He uncuffed me. "Mr. Robinson," the officer said, his tone shifting from command to caution. "This recording, this changes things. But I still have a silver alert on you. I cannot just let you drive away. You have a medical certificate proving I am sane," I countered, rubbing my wrists. "You have evidence that the reporting party has a motive to lie. If you detain me now, you are not protecting me. You are aiding and abetting a predator. Do you want to explain to your captain why you arrested a sane man fleeing domestic abuse based on the word of a man planning a murder?" The officer sighed. He ran a hand through his hair. He looked at his cruiser, then back at me. "If I let you go, you need to resolve this. I have to clear the alert. I will note that I made contact and you appeared lucid. But your son-in-law, he is going to keep calling. He is going to escalate this. I am counting on it," I said. "Thank you, officer." He handed me back my keys and my documents. "Watch your back, Mr. Robinson. This guy sounds dangerous. You have no idea," I muttered. I got back into the sedan and waited until the cruiser pulled away before I started the engine. My hands were shaking now. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, hollow feeling in my gut. Gavin had tried to kill me with the law. He had tried to strip me of my dignity, my freedom, and my life with a single phone call. He was not just a thief. He was a sociopath. I drove to a parking lot behind an abandoned strip mall, a place where no cameras would see me. I picked up the burner phone I had replaced the old one with and dialed Marshall. Marshall answered on the first ring. "Elijah." He issued a silver alert. "Marshall," I said, my voice flat. He told them I had a gun. I was just stopped by a state trooper. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Did they detain you?" "No." The medical paper worked. "And the recording?" "The cop let me go." But Marshall, he tried to get me killed. He knew what would happen if the police stopped me thinking I was armed. This is attempted swatting, Elijah Marshall said, his lawyer voice hardening into a weapon. We can file charges, false reporting, endangerment. No, I said. Not yet. If we file charges now, he goes on the defensive. He destroys the evidence in the house. He runs. I need him to stay. I need him to think he still has a chance. Elijah, he is dangerous. He just proved he is willing to use lethal force by proxy. I know. That is why we are going to take away his reason for fighting. Marshall, initiate the zoning protocol. I want you to pull the original land survey for the Maple Street property. The one with the easement clause. The easement clause, Marshall asked. You mean the one from 40 years ago? Yes. Gavin thinks he owns a $2 million house. He does not know that the house sits on land that is legally designated as a historical drainage easement under my name. He cannot sell it. He cannot mortgage it. He cannot even paint the front door without my signature. I want you to file a lien on the property first thing tomorrow morning. Do not send it to Gavin. Send it to the title company he is using for the sale. Block the transaction from the inside. I heard the smile in Marshall's voice. You are going to let him set up the deal and then watch it implode. I am going to let him build his castle, I said, and then I am going to show him that he built it on sand. I hung up the phone. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement of the parking lot. I was tired. I was old. But I was still standing. Gavin had made his move. He had played his ace. And he had missed. Now it was my turn. And I was not playing for money anymore. I was playing for souls. I started the car. I had one more stop to make before I disappeared completely. I had to see the only person in that house who was worth saving. I had to see Leo. I sat in the dark interior of the sedan parked 3 blocks away from the only home I had ever owned. The burner phone in my hand vibrated violently against my palm. It was a video call from Gavin. I hesitated. Answering gave him power, but ignoring it felt like abandoning the only innocent soul left in that house. I slid my thumb across the screen. Gavin's face filled the frame. He was red-faced, sweating, and the vein in his forehead pulsed with a dangerous rhythm. He was standing in the hallway outside Leo's bedroom. You think you are clever, old man, Gavin spat, his voice distorting through the cheap speakers. You think slipping a recording device into a $5 toy makes you James Bond. I found the box, Elijah. I found the packaging in the trash. He turned the camera. My heart slammed against my ribs. The door to Leo's room was shut, and I could hear the muffled, terrifying sound of my 7-year-old grandson sobbing. Leo, I shouted at the screen. Leo, can you hear me? He cannot hear you. Gavin laughed, turning the camera back to his gloating face. And he is not going to school tomorrow, or the day after. In fact, Leo is not leaving this room until you walk through that front door and sign the papers. He is grounded, Elijah, indefinitely. Because of you. Because you corrupted him with your paranoia. You are punishing a child for your crimes. I said, my voice low and trembling with a rage I had not felt since combat. Open that door, Gavin. Let him out. Not until you come home. The school will be told he is sick. The neighbors will be told he has the flu. No one will see him. No one will help him. He is my son, Elijah. I can do whatever I want. The sound of Leo crying grew louder, a desperate, high-pitched wail that tore through my soul. Grandpa, help me. I did not mean to be bad. He thinks he is in trouble because of the car, Gavin sneered. He thinks he caused this. That is the narrative I am feeding him. Every tear he sheds is on you. Come home, sign the deed, and he goes back to being a happy little boy. Stay away, and he stays in that room until he rots. The screen went black. I stared at the phone, my breathing ragged. I wanted to drive the car through the front door. I wanted to tear Gavin apart with my bare hands. But that was exactly what he wanted. He wanted me irrational. He wanted me to make a mistake that would land me in jail, leaving Leo completely defenseless. I closed my eyes and forced myself to breathe. I was an engineer. Panic was a structural failure. I needed reinforcement. I needed a plan. Gavin had just turned my grandson into a hostage in a negotiation for a house. He had weaponized a child's love. The phone rang again 5 minutes later. This time it was Jasmine. I answered, hoping against hope that my daughter had finally found her spine, that she had finally seen the monster she married. Daddy, she said, her voice thick with tears. Jasmine, I said, cutting straight to the wound. Did you know he locked Leo in his room? Daddy, please just listen, she sobbed. Gavin is out of control. He is so angry. You know how he gets when he is stressed. He says you are trying to ruin us. He says you froze the accounts. I froze the accounts because your husband tried to kill me, Jasmine. I froze them because he is a thief. Why is Leo locked in his room? Why are you letting him do this? I cannot stop him, she whispered. He is my husband, Daddy, and he is right about one thing. This is all happening because you left. If you just come back, we can fix this. We can be a family again. Just sign the papers, Daddy. Give him what he wants and he will calm down. Leo can go to school. We can be happy. Please, do it for Leo. I felt a cold hollowness expand in my chest. It was the death of hope. For years I had made excuses for her. I told myself she was weak. I told myself she was manipulated. I told myself she was a victim. But victims do not barter with the safety of their children. Accomplices do. Jasmine. I said, my voice devoid of warmth. You are not asking me to save the family. You are asking me to pay the ransom. It is not like that, she cried. We just need the money. Why is the money more important to you than us? You are old. You do not need it. We have debts, Daddy. Real debts. If Gavin does not pay them, bad men are coming. Do you want that for Leo? So that is it. You are willing to sacrifice your father and imprison your son to pay for your husband's mistakes. I am trying to survive, she screamed, her voice changing from pleading to angry in a split second. You are selfish. You always have been. You care more about your pride and your precious house than you do about me. If you loved me, you would help us. I did love you, Jasmine, I said softly. I loved you enough to build that house for you. I loved you enough to let you live there rent-free for 10 years. I loved you enough to look the other way when money went missing from my wallet. But love is not a suicide pact. I am not coming back, Jasmine, and I am not signing anything. Then do not blame me for what happens next, she hissed. Gavin is losing his patience, and when he snaps, I won't be able to protect anyone. She hung up. I sat in the silence of the car, the finality of her words settling over me like dust. My daughter was gone. The little girl I had carried on my shoulders was dead, replaced by this desperate, hollow woman who would sell her own flesh and blood for a reprieve from her husband's wrath. She was right about one thing. Gavin was going to snap, and I needed to be there when he did. Not in person, but I needed eyes and ears inside that fortress. I needed to know exactly how much time I had before he did something irreversible. I picked up the burner phone and dialed a number Marshall had given me. It was for a private investigator named Silas, a man who specialized in surveillance and worked in the gray areas of the law. I need a job done tonight, I told him when he answered. It requires technical skill. I am listening, Silas said, his voice gravelly and calm. I need listening devices planted in a residence on Maple Street, but you cannot go inside. The perimeter is alarmed and the owner is hostile. Then how do we get ears in? Silas asked. Because I built the house, I said. I pulled my laptop open and brought up the original schematics. The HVAC system. It is a high-velocity forced air system. I installed the intake vents myself. There is a main intake duct that runs directly under the crawl space, accessible from the exterior ventilation grate on the north side of the foundation. It feeds into the central plenum, which branches into every room in the house, including the master bedroom and the child's room. The ducts are galvanized steel. They carry sound like a telephone line if you place the receiver right. Send me the address, Silas said. I met Silas an hour later in the alley behind the house. He was a small, wiry man who moved like a shadow. I handed him the diagram I had drawn, highlighting the exact location of the external grate and the distance to the central plenum. You feed the wire here, I whispered, pointing to the schematic. 10 feet in. Magnetize the receiver to the top of the duct. It will pick up everything from the ground floor and the second floor vents. Silas nodded, impressed. You know your stuff, old man. I engineered it, I said. Go. I watched from the shadows as Silas vanished into the bushes lining the north side of the house. I waited 5 minutes, 10 minutes. My heart hammered against my ribs. If Gavin looked out the window, if he heard a noise, it would be over. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Silas. Link active. Audio is live. I put in my earbuds and opened the app Silas had instructed me to download. The sound was crystal clear, amplified by the acoustics of the metal ducts. I heard the hum of the refrigerator. I heard footsteps heavy and pacing in the living room. And then I heard Gavin. The sound was terrifying. It was the sound of glass shattering. That ungrateful piece of filth, Gavin roared. I gave him a roof. I gave him a family. And this is how he repays me. By running away like a coward. I heard the dull thud of something heavy hitting the wall. A chair, perhaps. Gavin, stop it, Jasmine pleaded, her voice trembling. You are scaring me. You should be scared, Gavin screamed. We are sitting on a powder keg, Jasmine. Those guys gave me until Friday. Do you know what they do to people who don't pay? They do not just break legs. They burn things down. He paused, and I could hear his heavy breathing through the microphone. I hate this house, he spat. I hate everything about it. I hate the way it smells like him. I hate his stupid books. I hate his face. I heard the sound of ripping paper. He was destroying my books, my documents. And you know what I hate most? Gavin continued, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. I hate that I have to pretend to respect him. I have to pretend that he is my equal. A man like him should be serving me, not looking down his nose at me. I should own him. I froze. The racism had always been subtle before. A look, a comment about my background, a joke about affirmative action. But here in the privacy of the house I had built for him, the mask was completely gone. He did not just hate me because I had money. He hated me because I was a black man who had succeeded where he had failed. He hated me because I defied his worldview of superiority. I heard footsteps storming up the stairs. The audio shifted, picking up the sound from the vent in the hallway. He was heading toward Leo's room. I held my breath, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. Gavin banged on the door. Leo, he shouted. Stop crying. Stop crying right now, or I will give you something to cry about. The crying stopped instantly, replaced by a terrified silence that was infinitely worse. Your grandfather left you, Gavin yelled through the door. He does not care about you. He abandoned you because he is a selfish old man. You belong to me now. Do you hear me? You are mine. And you will do exactly what I say. I pulled the earbuds out, unable to listen to another second. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. This was not just a financial dispute, this was a hostage situation. He was breaking my grandson's spirit to get to me. I looked at the house looming in the darkness. I wanted to rush in. But I knew Gavin. He was desperate. He was violent. And if I went in there alone tonight without leverage, without the law on my side, he would use Leo as a shield. Or worse, I needed to end this, but I could not do it with force. I had to do it with leverage. Gavin had mentioned a deadline, Friday. He had mentioned men who burn things down. I knew who they were. I knew the kind of men Gavin associated with. Low-level mobsters, wannabe gangsters who lent money at 40% interest. Gavin thought his debt was his biggest problem. He was wrong. His debt was my biggest weapon. I started the car. I had a meeting to arrange. Not with the police, not with a judge, but with the men who held Gavin's life in their hands. I was going to buy his debt. I was going to become the one thing Gavin feared more than the police. I was going to become his master. The audio feed in my earbuds crackled with the sound of a heavy fist pounding against the front door of my house. I sat in the darkness of my car parked 3 streets away and felt the vibration as if it were my own chest being struck. It was 2 a.m. Gavin had thought he could buy time, but time was a commodity he had run out of. I heard the door open. There was no greeting, just the sound of heavy boots on the hardwood floor I had laid myself 30 years ago. You are late, Gavin, a deep voice boomed through the microphone. We do not like waiting. Please, I heard Gavin stammer, his voice pitching high with terror. I told you Friday. I just need until Friday. The old man is gone. He is gone, and I am filing the paperwork tomorrow. We do not care about the old man, the intruder said. I heard the sickening sound of porcelain shattering. It sounded like the antique vase Jasmine kept in the foyer. We care about the $500,000 you borrowed to play big shot developer. You said you had assets. You said you had equity. I do, Gavin screamed. This house. Look at it. It is worth $2 million. It is mine. Well, it is practically mine. I just need to get the signature. Practically yours does not pay my boss. The intruder replied. His voice remained terrifyingly calm. You have 48 hours. If we do not have the cash or the deed by Friday night, we are not going to break your legs, Gavin. We are going to burn this place down with you inside it. I heard Jasmine scream. No, please, we have a son. Shut your mouth, the intruder snapped. I heard a scuffle, a dull thud, and then Gavin shouting, Don't touch her. I will get it. I swear. I will sell it. I will sell everything. Just give me 48 hours. 48 hours, the voice repeated. And Gavin, if you try to run, remember we know where your kid goes to school. We know where your wife shops. You are not a ghost. You are just a man who owes money to the wrong people. The front door slammed shut with enough force to rattle the HVAC vents where my microphone was hidden. Silence descended on the house, but it was the heavy, suffocating silence of a bomb waiting to detonate. I took the earbuds out, my hands trembling slightly. They had threatened Leo. They had threatened to burn down the legacy I built for my family. Gavin had invited wolves into the fold, and now he was trying to feed them my life to save his own skin. I started the car and drove. I needed to get to Marshall. The time for observation was over. It was time to pull the trigger. I met Marshall in his office at 4 a.m. He looked tired, his tie loosened, and a cup of black coffee steaming on his desk. But his eyes were sharp. He was a warrior of the courtroom, and he smelled blood. "Did you bring the survey?" Marshall asked. I placed the weathered leather tube on his desk. I unrolled the blueprints, the paper yellowed with age. These were not just drawings of a house. They were the history of a neighborhood. 40 years ago, this land was a dump, I said, tracing the property lines with my finger. The city didn't want it. Developers didn't want it. It was swampy, filled with industrial runoff. Everyone saw garbage. I saw potential. I used my background in structural engineering to design a drainage system that stabilized the soil. I bought the entire block for pennies on the dollar. Marshall leaned in, examining the fine print I had drafted decades ago. "And here is the kicker," I said, tapping a paragraph at the bottom of the deed. "When I subdivided the land and sold the surrounding lots, I kept the master deed for the parcel my house sits on. It is classified as a historical drainage easement managed by a trust." Marshall read the clause out loud. "The primary residence cannot be sold, transferred, or mortgaged without the explicit notarized consent of the trust administrator. And let me guess, you are the administrator." I nodded. "Gavin thinks he is waiting for me to sign a simple transfer of ownership. He thinks he just needs power of attorney. He is wrong. Even if he forged my signature on a sale document, the title company would flag it immediately because the land itself is locked. He is trying to sell a house that legally cannot be separated from the trust." Marshall sat back, a slow smile spreading across his face. "So he promised the Sharks a house he cannot deliver." "Exactly," I said. "But he does not know that yet, and I need him to believe he can still win. I need him desperate enough to take the bait." Marshall pulled a file from his drawer. "We traced the debt, Elijah. You were right. It is a syndicate operating out of New Jersey. They bought Gavin's gambling debts and leveraged them against his business loans. They do not want the house, really. They want their money. They are businessmen. Violent businessmen, but businessmen nonetheless. How much?" I asked. $500,000 principal. With interest and penalties, they are asking for $750,000. "Buy it," I said. Marshall blinked. "Excuse me." "Buy the debt, Marshall. Contact their intermediary. Tell them a private investment firm is interested in acquiring their high-risk distressed assets. Offer them $600,000 cash. Immediate transfer, no questions asked. Elijah, that is over $500,000 of your retirement. It is not spending, Marshall. It is investing. Investing in my grandson's future. These guys want a payout. If they kill Gavin, they get nothing. If they burn the house down, they get nothing. Offer them the cash. They will take it and walk away." And then Marshall asked, understanding dawning in his eyes. "And then I become the creditor," I said. "I become the man Gavin owes $700,000 to. I own his debt. I own his fear. And I own him." Marshall picked up the phone. "I will make the call. It will take a few hours to route the funds through the shell company so your name does not appear. Vance Holdings, right?" "Vance Holdings," I confirmed. "Use his own last name against him. Let him think it is some corporate entity coming for him." By noon, the deal was done. The wire transfer cleared. The syndicate transferred the promissory note to the shell company. Technically and legally, I now owned every cent of debt Gavin had accumulated. I could foreclose on him. I could drag him to court. But I had a better plan. I needed to get back into the house. I needed to get Leo out. And I needed Gavin to expose himself publicly in front of witnesses so that when the hammer fell, there would be no doubt about who the villain was. I sat in my hotel room staring at the burner phone. I composed a text message. I did not send it from my number. I sent it using an anonymous spoofing service that masked the origin. I typed, carefully crafting the words to appeal to Gavin's greed and his arrogance. "Gavin, this is Elijah. I am tired. I am sick. The medication is making me confused. I do not want to fight anymore. I want to come home. If you promise to take care of me, I will sign the house over to you. But I want to do it right. I want a celebration. Our 40th anniversary is this weekend. Organize a party. Invite your friends. Invite your investors. I want everyone to see that we are a happy family. I will sign the papers in front of everyone as a gift to you and Jasmine. Just let me rest until then. I will be home tomorrow. I read it over. It sounded like a defeated, broken old man. It sounded like surrender. I pressed send. The reply came 30 seconds later. Dad, I am so relieved. We have been so worried. Of course we will have a party. Come home. We will take care of everything. I stared at the screen. We will take care of everything. He meant he would take care of ending me once the signature was dry. He thought he had won. He thought his pressure tactics had worked. He had no idea that he had just invited his executioner to dinner. I packed my bag. I put the patent documents back in the safe deposit box at the bank. But I kept one thing, the audio recording from the toy car. I transferred it to a secure cloud drive and made 3 physical copies on flash drives. I was going back into the lion's den. I knew Gavin would try to drug me again. I knew he would try to control me. But this time, I was not a victim. I was an operative on a mission. I checked out of the hotel and got into the gray sedan. I drove toward Maple Street, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The house would be waiting. Gavin would be waiting with his fake smile and his poisoned tea. Let him smile. Let him think he is the king of the castle. Because on Saturday night, in front of the entire town, I was going to bring the walls down on top of him. I pulled the gray sedan up to the curb a block away from the house on Maple Street. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I did not look like Elijah Robinson, the structural engineer who held patents on earthquake-resistant foundations. I looked like the man Gavin wanted me to be. I had rubbed dust into my clothes and let my stubble grow out for 2 days. I practiced a tremor in my right hand until it looked involuntary. I walked the last 100 yards with a shuffle, my shoulders hunched. The house loomed ahead, a beautiful colonial structure I had designed to welcome light, but now it felt like a fortress designed to keep secrets in. Gavin opened the door before I even knocked. He must have been watching from the window like a vulture waiting for carrion. His face went through a complex series of contortions. First shock, then suspicion, and finally, a smooth, practiced mask of relief. "Dad," he exclaimed loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "You are back. Thank God." We were so worried. He pulled me into a hug that felt more like a frisk. I let my body go limp, feigning exhaustion. I leaned heavily against him, smelling the stale scent of bourbon on his breath. "I got confused, Gavin," I mumbled, slurring my words slightly. "I went fishing, but the lake was gone. I could not find the water." Gavin pulled back, holding me by the shoulders. His eyes searched mine, looking for a spark of defiance. I gave him nothing but a vacant, watery stare. "It is okay, Dad," he said, guiding me inside. "You are home now. The lake is right where it always was. You just got turned around. It happens." He led me into the living room. Jasmine was sitting on the sofa, her eyes red and swollen. When she saw me, she burst into fresh tears. "Daddy," she cried, rushing over to hug me. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry for everything." Her guilt was palpable, a heavy wet blanket in the room. But I did not comfort her. I could not. Comforting her would mean breaking character. I patted her arm awkwardly, my hand shaking. "Where is Leo?" I asked, looking around the room with exaggerated confusion. "I brought him a fish." Jasmine froze. Gavin stepped in smoothly. "Leo is at a sleepover, Dad. Remember we told you this morning. He is with his friends. It was a lie. I knew Leo was upstairs locked in his room, probably listening to every word through the vent, but I nodded slowly, accepting the lie as if it were gospel. Right. Sleepover. I forgot." Gavin exchanged a look with Jasmine. It was a look of triumph. He believed he had won. He believed the pills and the stress had finally broken my mind. He believed I was the empty shell he needed me to be to sign away my life. "Let's get you sat down," Gavin said, guiding me to the armchair. "You look terrible. You need rest. Tomorrow is the big party, remember the anniversary. Everyone is coming to celebrate you." I sat down, letting out a long groan. "Party?" I asked blankly. "Yes, Dad. The party where you sign the house over to us, so we can take care of you properly. So you do not have to worry about taxes or repairs anymore. Ah, yes, I said, closing my eyes. The papers. I want to sign. I am tired of worrying Gavin. Good, Gavin said. His voice dripped with satisfaction. You just rest now. I will go get you something to help you sleep. He walked toward the kitchen, his step light and bouncy. He was walking on air. He had the house. He had the old man compliant. He had the victory. He had no idea he was walking on a trap door I had just unlatched. 10 minutes later, Gavin returned with a steaming mug of tea and 2 blue pills on a small saucer. The ceramic clinked as he set it down on the side table. Here, Dad, he said. Dr. Sterling called while you were gone. He said you missed your doses. He sent these over. They will help with the confusion. They will help you sleep. I looked at the pills. They were not from Dr. Sterling. Sterling would never prescribe sedatives to a man my age without a full workup. These looked like high-strength sleeping aids or perhaps muscle relaxers. The kind that turned your brain into mush and made you compliant. I reached for the saucer, my hand trembling violently. I knocked the spoon onto the floor. Oops, I muttered. Clumsy. I got it, Gavin said, bending down to pick up the spoon. In that split second, while his eyes were on the floor, I palmed the pills. I moved with the speed of a man who had caught falling tools on construction sites for 40 years. By the time Gavin straightened up, the saucer was empty, and my hand was bringing the mug of tea to my lips. I took a large gulp of the hot liquid. It burned my throat, but I did not flinch. I made a show of swallowing hard, pushing my tongue against the roof of my cheek where the pills were safely tucked. Good, Gavin said, watching my throat work. Drink it all. You need the hydration. I finished the tea, placing the mug down with a rattle. I let my eyelids droop. I let my head loll to the side. I feel sleepy, I mumbled. That is the medicine working, Gavin said. Come on, let's get you to bed. He hauled me up and half-dragged me up the stairs. We passed Leo's door. It was locked from the outside with a new heavy-duty deadbolt. My heart seized. I wanted to smash the door down. I wanted to grab Gavin by the throat and squeeze until he gave me the key. But I forced my body to remain limp. Not yet. Tomorrow. Gavin dumped me onto my bed. He did not bother to take off my shoes. He pulled the comforter over me and stood there watching me for a moment. Sleep tight, old man, he whispered. Tomorrow you are going to make me very rich. He turned off the light and closed the door. I heard the lock click. He had locked me in my own bedroom. I waited. I lay in the darkness listening to the house settle. I counted the minutes. 10, 20, 30. I heard Gavin and Jasmine go into their bedroom down the hall. I heard their voices muffled and arguing, then silence. I sat up. I spat the 2 blue pills into a tissue and flushed them down the ensuite toilet. I splashed cold water on my face, washing away the act. The trembling stopped. The confusion vanished. Elijah, the engineer, was back. I checked my watch. 2 a.m. The witching hour. I went to the bedroom door. It was locked, but it was a standard interior privacy lock. I had installed it. I knew how to bypass it. I took a thin, stiff piece of plastic I had cut from a keycard at the hotel and slid it into the jamb. I felt the latch mechanism. A quick shimmy, a sharp push, and the lock clicked open. I stepped into the hallway. The floorboards creaked. I froze. I knew every board in this house. The third one from the left near the linen closet always groaned. I stepped over it, placing my weight on the support beams I knew lay underneath the carpet. I moved like a ghost. My destination was not the front door. It was Gavin's office. I pushed the door open. The room smelled of stale cigarette smoke and desperation. Gavin's laptop was sitting on the desk, the little light on the side blinking in sleep mode. I sat down in his chair. I opened the laptop. Password protected. Of course. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried Jasmine's birthday. Incorrect. I tried Leo's. Incorrect. I sat back and thought. Gavin was a narcissist. He was obsessed with money. He was obsessed with status. I typed in, success. Incorrect. I looked around the desk. There was a framed photo of him shaking hands with a local politician, a man known for his corruption. There was a stack of overdue bills. And there was a sticky note stuck to the bottom of the monitor, half hidden. It had a string of numbers. 1 million. I typed it in. The screen unlocked. I almost laughed. His password was the amount of money he thought he deserved. I plugged in my flash drive. I navigated to his documents folder. It was a mess of disorganized files, but I knew what I was looking for. I searched for PDF files created in the last month. There it was. Mortgage application revised. PDF. I opened it. It was a loan application to a secondary lender, a predatory bank that specialized in high-risk mortgages. The loan amount was $200,000. The collateral was my house, and at the bottom of the page in black ink was my signature. It was a good forgery. He had practiced, but he had missed the tell. I always crossed my A and Elijah with a slight upward slant, a habit from my drafting days. This signature had a flat cross. I copied the file to my drive. Then I found something else, a folder labeled medical. Inside were scans of letterhead from 3 different psychiatric clinics, blank templates, and a drafted letter declaring me incompetent dated tomorrow. He was going to have a doctor sign it at the party. He had probably bribed someone to attend. I copied everything. Emails to the loan sharks. Texts to Jasmine threatening her. It was a treasure trove of felony charges. Suddenly I heard a noise. A toilet flushed down the hall. Footsteps. Heavy, thudding footsteps coming toward the office. Gavin was awake. I yanked the flash drive out. I closed the laptop. The screen went black, but the sleep light didn't start blinking immediately. It was still processing the shutdown. The doorknob turned. I dove under the heavy oak desk, pulling my knees to my chest. The door opened. Light from the hallway spilled into the room, cutting a rectangle across the floor. I saw Gavin's bare feet step onto the carpet. He walked to the desk. I held my breath. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. If he looked down, if he sat in the chair, he would see me. I had no weapon. I was a 69-year-old man, hiding under a desk from a man half my age who wanted me dead. Gavin stood there for a moment. He touched the laptop. "Why is this warm?" he muttered. I squeezed my eyes shut. He knew. He had to know. He opened the laptop. I saw the blue glow of the screen reflect off his legs. He typed something. Then he grunted. "Updates," he said to himself. "Stupid machine." He closed the laptop again. He stood there for another second, scratching his stomach. Then he turned and walked out, closing the door behind him. I stayed under the desk for 5 full minutes, listening to the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears. I waited until I heard his bedroom door close and the bed springs creak. I crawled out, my legs stiff. I had the evidence. I had the forgery. I had the proof of his conspiracy. I crept back to my room and locked the door from the inside, resetting the latch so it looked undisturbed. I hid the flash drive inside the hollow curtain rod, a hiding spot I had designed years ago for emergency cash. I lay down on the bed, but I did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling, watching the shadows shift as the sun began to rise. Tomorrow was the party. Tomorrow Gavin thought he was going to be crowned king. He didn't know the guillotine was already sharpened. The evening sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and red as the first guests arrived at the house on Maple Street. From my vantage point in the hallway, I watched my home transform into a stage for Gavin's grand performance. He had hired a catering company that moved with military precision, setting up high tables draped in white linen and arranging trays of hors d'oeuvres that cost more than my first car. The scent of roasted duck and expensive perfume began to fill the air, masking the underlying smell of rot that I knew permeated the very foundation of this family. Gavin appeared from the kitchen, adjusting his silk tie in the mirror. He looked the part of the successful real estate mogul. His suit was tailored, his hair was perfect, and his smile was bright enough to blind a man. He walked over to me, his eyes scanning me, not with affection, but with the critical gaze of a director inspecting a prop. "Dad, you look great," he lied. I was wearing an old suit he had pulled from the back of my closet, one that hung loosely on my frame because I had lost weight from the stress of the last month. "But we need to make sure you are comfortable. It is going to be a long night." He gestured to the corner where a wheelchair sat waiting. It was brand new, the chrome gleaming under the foyer lights. I did not need a wheelchair. I had walked 3 miles in the dark just days ago. I had climbed trellises. I had crawled under desks. My legs were the strongest part of me, but Gavin needed the optics. He needed the guest to see a frail, dependent old man who needed his son-in-law to manage his life. I stared at the chair. It looked like a cage. "I can walk, Gavin," I mumbled, keeping my voice raspy and weak. "Just sit down, Dad." Gavin said, his voice dropping to that steel whisper he used when we were alone. Don't make a scene. Do you want to go back to being confused? Do you want me to call the doctors again? Sit in the chair. I lowered myself into the seat, my hands gripping the armrests. I felt smaller instantly, diminished. Gavin smiled and patted my shoulder. There. Much better. Now remember, tonight is about celebrating you. Just smile, nod, and when I tell you to sign, you sign. Then you can go back to bed and sleep for a week. He wheeled me into the living room, positioning me near the fireplace like a piece of antique furniture on display. The guests began to filter in. I recognized none of them. These were not my friends. They were not neighbors I had known for 40 years. They were Gavin's people. Men in shiny suits with restless eyes, women who looked at the decor and calculated the square footage. They held champagne flutes and spoke in hushed tones about equity and market volatility. I saw them look at me. Their gazes slid over me with a mixture of pity and disdain. To them, I was not Elijah Robinson, the man who held patents on seismic dampeners. I was an asset to be liquidated. I was the obstacle that was finally being removed. Poor thing, I heard a woman in a red dress whisper to her companion. Gavin says his mind is completely gone. It is a mercy, really, that they are taking control. He would probably burn the house down if they left him alone. Her companion nodded, taking a sip of his drink. Gavin is a saint for taking this on. Most people would have just put him in a home. That prime real estate, though, it is going to make a killing once they knock this old place down. I gripped the armrests of the wheelchair so hard my knuckles turned white. They were planning to tear it down. My house. The house I built with my own hands. The house where my wife took her last breath. They saw it as a tear-down lot. Then I saw them. The two men from the restaurant, the loan sharks. They were standing near the bar looking uncomfortable in their ill-fitting suits. They were not drinking. They were watching Gavin. They were the vultures waiting for the carcass. Gavin walked over to them, laughing too loudly, clapping one of them on the back. I saw the fear in his eyes, though. He was performing for his life. Jasmine entered the room. She was wearing a dress I had bought her for her birthday 3 years ago. She looked beautiful, but her face was pale, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit. She saw me in the wheelchair and stopped. For a second, I saw her lip tremble. She knew I could walk. She knew this was a humiliation. She walked over to me. "Daddy," she whispered, kneeling beside the chair so she was at eye level. "Can I get you anything?" "Water." I looked at my daughter. I looked for the fire she used to have. I found only ash. "I want to go home, Jasmine," I said softly, using the line I knew would twist the knife in her gut. "You are home, Daddy," she said, a tear slipping down her cheek. "No, I am not. This isn't my home anymore." She stood up abruptly, wiping her face. She could not handle the truth. She walked away, retreating to the side of her husband, standing in his shadow where she felt safe. The room reached capacity. The noise level rose, a cacophony of shallow laughter and clinking glass. Gavin moved to the center of the room. He tapped a spoon against his champagne flute. The sound cut through the chatter. Silence fell over the crowd. Gavin stood tall, puffing out his chest. He looked every inch the patriarch he desperately wanted to be. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice projecting with the confidence of a man who believes he has already won. "Tonight is a very special night. We are here to celebrate 40 years of this house. 40 years of the Robinson family legacy." He gestured toward me. I sat motionless in the wheelchair, my face a mask of vacuous confusion. "As many of you know, it has been a difficult year," Gavin continued, his voice dropping to a somber, reverent tone. "My father-in-law Elijah has been struggling. Age is a thief that takes our memories and our independence. It has been heartbreaking to watch such a strong man fade." He paused, letting the sympathy ripple through the room. I saw heads nodding. I saw sad smiles. He was good. He was sickeningly good. "But family steps up," Gavin said, his voice rising again, filled with passion. "Jasmine and I promised Elijah that we would never abandon him. We promised that we would protect his legacy. And tonight Elijah is fulfilling his own promise. He is passing the torch. He is entrusting us with his greatest creation so that we can ensure he is cared for with the dignity he deserves for the rest of his days." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. Fake, glistening tears. "We love you, Dad." and we are going to take care of you." The room erupted in applause. People were clapping for his lies. They were cheering for my demise. Jasmine stood next to him, her head bowed, her hands clasped in front of her. She did not look up. She did not protest. Her silence was a signature on my death warrant just as valid as the one I was about to provide. Gavin waved his hand and a man stepped forward from the shadows. It was the lawyer, not Marshall. It was a man I recognized from the files I had stolen from Gavin's computer, a lawyer known for facilitating shady deals and looking the other way. He was carrying a leather portfolio. He placed the portfolio on a small antique table that had been positioned in front of my wheelchair. He opened it, revealing the documents, the deed transfer, the irrevocable power of attorney, the surrender of assets. Gavin walked over to me. The crowd leaned in. This was the climax of the show, the transfer of power. "Okay, Dad," Gavin said, his voice gentle for the audience, but his hand gripping my shoulder with a bruising force. "It is time, just like we practiced. Sign here and here." He pulled a gold fountain pen from his pocket. It was my pen. He had stolen it from my desk. The disrespect was so absolute it was almost funny. He uncapped it and placed it in my hand. My hand trembled. I let the tremor travel up my arm, shaking my shoulder. I stared at the paper, blinking rapidly as if I could not focus, where I mumbled, my voice barely audible. "Right here, Dad," Gavin said, pointing to the line. He wrapped his hand around mine, guiding the pen to the paper. His palm was sweaty. I let the pen hover over the line. The tip touched the paper, leaving a small ink bleed. The room was silent. Everyone was watching. The loan sharks in the corner were leaning forward, their eyes hungry. Jasmine was holding her breath. I looked at the paper. I read the words. Transfer of title, fee simple, consideration of $1. He was buying my life's work for $1. I felt Gavin's patience snapping. He pressed down on my hand, trying to force the motion. "Sign it," he hissed in my ear so low only I could hear. "Sign it, or you never see the boy again." That was it. The trigger, the tremor in my hand stopped. Instantly. My arm became granite. I gripped the pen, not with the weak grasp of a dying old man, but with the precision of a draftsman who had drawn miles of steel girders. I pulled my hand away from his grip. Gavin looked down, confused by the sudden resistance. I looked up. I locked eyes with him. I let the vacancy drain from my face, revealing the sharp, cold intelligence that had been watching him for days. Gavin took a step back, unsettled by the change. "Dad." I lifted the pen. I did not sign. With a sudden, violent motion, I stabbed the nib of the gold pen into the solid mahogany of the table. It stood there, quivering upright like a dagger. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. I stood up. I did not struggle. I did not use the armrest for support. I stood up smoothly, powerfully, rising to my full height of 6 feet 2 inches. I towered over Gavin. The guests gasped. Someone dropped a glass. "Dad, what are you doing?" Gavin stammered, his face draining of color. "Sit down. You are confused." I reached into my pocket. I did not pull out reading glasses. I pulled out a small black remote control. "I do not need glasses to see through you, Gavin," I said, my voice booming through the room, deep and resonant. I looked at the crowd. I looked at the loan sharks. I looked at my daughter. And then I looked back at the terrified man who had underestimated me. "You wanted a show, Gavin," I said. "You wanted everyone to witness the transfer of the Robinson legacy." I pressed the button on the remote. "Well, let us give them a show." "Security, remove him!" Gavin screamed, his voice cracking with a mix of panic and fury. He pointed a shaking finger at me, his face contorted into a mask of pure terror. "Get this crazy old man out of here before he hurts someone. He is having an episode." 2 burly men in black suits who had been standing by the front door started to move toward me. They were not police. They were private security hired muscle Gavin had brought in to ensure the transfer of power went smoothly. They looked at me with the indifference of men who were paid to handle problems, not ask questions. I did not flinch. I did not retreat. I looked at the empty wheelchair behind me, the chrome prison I had occupied for the last hour. With a single fluid motion, I raised my leg and kicked it. My boot connected with the metal frame with a resounding clang. The wheelchair skidded across the polished hardwood floor, spinning wildly until it crashed into the hors d'oeuvres table, sending crystal glasses and expensive china shattering to the ground. The sound was like an explosion. The security guards froze. The guests recoiled, gasping in shock. "I am not having an episode, Gavin," I said, my voice steady and cold, cutting through the chaos. "And I am not frail. I walked 10 miles through the jungle in Vietnam with a shrapnel wound in my leg. Do you really think 2 rent-a-cops in a wheelchair are enough to hold me down? I took a step forward. The security guards looked at Gavin for instructions, then back at me. They saw a man standing 6 feet 2 inches tall, with shoulders that had carried beams of steel, and the eyes of a soldier who had seen things they could not imagine. They stopped moving. They realized that whatever they were being paid, it was not enough to fight a man who had just declared war in his own living room. Gavin looked around frantically, realizing he was losing control of the narrative. He turned to the guests, his hands raised in a pleading gesture. "Please, everyone stay calm. My father-in-law is confused. He can be violent when he is off his medication. We just need to get him sedated for his own safety." Sedated. I repeated, a dark laugh bubbling up from my chest. "Is that what you call it, Gavin? Is that what you call the poison? You have been feeding me for weeks. Lies!" Gavin shouted. "He is lying! Look at him. He is insane." I reached into the pocket of my jacket. The room tensed. Gavin flinched, expecting a weapon. I pulled out the plastic police car. It was small, scratched, and missing a wheel from where it had been wedged under the sofa. In the opulent setting of the party surrounded by crystal and silk, it looked absurd, a piece of trash held in the hand of a madman. "What is that?" Gavin sneered, trying to regain his footing. "A toy." "You are going to fight me with a toy." "This is not a toy," I said, holding it up so the light caught the cheap plastic. "This is my witness. This $5 piece of plastic has more integrity than you will ever possess. My grandson Leo gave this to me. He told me to hide it because he was afraid of you. He was afraid of his own father." I walked over to the sound system control panel on the wall. I knew the system. I had wired it myself, integrating it into the smart home network I designed. I tapped the screen, overriding the smooth jazz playlist Gavin had curated. I connected my phone via Bluetooth. "You wanted everyone to hear the truth, Gavin," I said. "You wanted a speech. You wanted a legacy. Well, here it is." I pressed play on the recording I had transferred from the toy car. The sound of static filled the room, loud and harsh over the expensive speakers. Then Gavin's voice boomed out, amplified to a terrifying volume. "If the old man had the decency to drop dead, we would not be in this mess." The guests froze. A woman covered her mouth with her hand. I loosened the railing on the main landing. Just enough. "He is heavy. If he leans on it tomorrow morning, it will give way." Gavin turned pale as a sheet. He looked at the speakers as if they were demons speaking in tongues. A fall from that height at his age. Neck snap or hip fracture. Either way, he ends up in the hospital and never comes out. We get power of attorney by Monday. We sell the house by Friday. The recording continued, playing the vile racial slurs Gavin had used, the hatred he had spewed about me, about my people, about my very existence. I hate that I have to pretend to respect him. A man like him should be serving me. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum, a void where respect used to be. The guests looked at Gavin with horror, with disgust. The investors, the people Gavin had tried so hard to impress, were backing away from him as if he were radioactive. Jasmine stood by the fireplace, her hands covering her face, sobbing silently. She knew. She had been there. Her silence on the recording was just as damning as Gavin's words. I stopped the recording. "That is the man you are doing business with," I said, addressing the crowd. "A man who plans the murder of his family to pay his debts. A man who poisons the tea of the hand that feeds him. A man who hates the very foundation he stands on." Gavin looked around the room. He saw his world crumbling. He saw the loan sharks near the bar exchanging a look and walking toward the exit. He saw his reputation turning to ash. He snapped. The mask of the civilized businessman shattered completely. His face twisted into a snarl of pure animalistic rage. He let out a guttural scream, a sound of pure frustration and hate. "You ruined everything," he roared. He lunged at me. He moved fast, fueled by adrenaline and desperation. He grabbed a heavy crystal decanter from the table and swung it like a club, aiming for my head. The crowd screamed. But Gavin made a critical mistake. He assumed I was an old man. He assumed I was slow. He assumed that 40 years of peace had erased the training of my youth. He was wrong. I did not step back. I stepped in. I used the Krav Maga technique I had learned decades ago and practiced every morning in my garage to keep my joints limber. As his arm came down, I blocked it with my left forearm, deflecting the blow away from my skull. The crystal decanter smashed into the wall behind me, shattering into 1,000 pieces. I grabbed his wrist with my left hand and his shoulder with my right. I used his own momentum against him. I pivoted my hips, engaging my core the same way I would to lift a heavy beam. "Gravity, Gavin," I whispered in his ear. "It always wins." I swept his leg. Gavin's feet left the floor. He went horizontal in the air for a split second, a look of absolute shock on his face. Then he hit the hardwood floor with a bone-jarring thud. The breath left his lungs in a wheezing gasp. I did not let go. I twisted his arm behind his back, pinning him to the floor with my knee in the center of his spine. It was a control hold, efficient and painful. Gavin struggled, thrashing like a fish on a hook, but I applied just enough pressure to the joint to make him cry out. "Stay down!" I commanded, my voice hard as steel. I looked up. The guests were staring at me with wide eyes. They saw the old man in the ill-fitting suit pinning the young, vibrant entrepreneur to the ground with ease. They saw the strength that had been hidden under the facade of age. Jasmine screamed, "Daddy, stop! You are hurting him! He tried to kill me, Jasmine!" I shouted back, not loosening my grip. "He tried to bash my head in with a bottle. Open your eyes!" Gavin groaned, his face pressed against the floorboards. "Get off me, you crazy old bat! You are dead! You are so dead!" I leaned down close to his ear. "You are the one who is done, Gavin. Look around you. Look at them." I forced his head up so he could see the room. The guests were not rushing to help him. They were taking out their phones. They were recording. They were witnessing the fall of Gavin Vance. The loan sharks had stopped at the door. One of them gave me a nod, a gesture of respect from one predator to another. They knew the game was over. They knew Gavin was a liability. They walked out, leaving him to his fate. "You built your life on lies, Gavin," I said, my voice calm amidst the chaos. "You thought you could knock down the pillars and the roof would stay up. But you forgot one thing." I tightened my grip on his wrist, feeling the pulse of his fear. "I am the foundation." And I just decided to shake. Gavin went limp, defeat finally washing over him. He lay there on the floor of the house he wanted to steal, pinned by the man he wanted to kill, surrounded by the wreckage of his own ambition. I looked at the security guards. "Call the police," I ordered. They nodded, pulling out their phones immediately. They took orders from the alpha in the room, and there was no doubt left about who that was. I stood up, releasing Gavin, but keeping my foot ready to strike if he moved. He curled into a ball, sobbing into the floor. It was a pathetic sound, the sound of a bully who had finally met someone who pushed back. I adjusted my jacket, smoothing the lapels. I picked up the plastic police car from where I had set it down on the table. I wiped a smudge of dust from its roof. I looked at the stunned crowd. "The party is over," I said. "Please leave." As the guests shuffled out, whispering and glancing back at the scene, I stood guard over my fallen enemy. The adrenaline was fading, but my resolve was harder than concrete. This was only the beginning. The physical fight was over, but the real war, the war for my home and my grandson, was just entering its final phase, and I was ready. "You think this is over?" Old man Gavin screamed from the floor, wiping a trail of blood from his lip. His suit was ruined. His hair was a mess, but his eyes still held that manic glint of a man who believes he is smarter than everyone in the room. "You think because you beat me up, you win. You know nothing. You cannot kick me out of this house. You cannot touch me." I looked down at him, my breathing steady. The guests had mostly fled, leaving only the security guards who were now detaining Gavin on my orders and a few stragglers too shocked to move. Jasmine was still weeping by the fireplace, a statue of misery. "I do not need to kick you out, Gavin," I said calmly. "The police will do that for me. Go ahead, call them." Gavin laughed, a wet gurgling sound. "Charge me with assault. I will be out on bail in an hour." "But you are going to lose this house anyway. You think I was waiting for your signature to make moves. I already leveraged this property, Elijah. I took out a loan against the equity 3 days ago. The papers are signed. The money is in my offshore account. If I go down, the bank forecloses. You lose everything." He struggled to sit up, ignoring the hand of the guard on his shoulder. "I won, Elijah. Even if I lose, I won. The bank owns this place now, and when I declare bankruptcy, they will come for the keys. You will be on the street just like me." He was bluffing, or he thought he wasn't. He believed his own lies. He believed that the forged documents he had sent out were valid. He believed that the machinery of the financial system was too big and too blind to catch a man like him. He was wrong. He forgot that buildings do not stand on paperwork alone. They stand on inspections, on verification. I walked over to the small table where the stabbed pen still stood upright in the wood. I pulled it out with a sharp tug. "You mean the loan application you filed with Western Pacific Lenders?" I asked. "The one for $200,000 secured against the deed to 45 Maple Street." Gavin froze. His mouth hung open. "How do you know the name of the lender?" "Because I read your emails, Gavin. I read them while you were sleeping 2 doors down from me. But there is something you need to understand about that loan." I paused, letting the silence stretch, letting his anxiety spike. "It was never approved by a bank." "What are you talking about?" Gavin spat. "I got the confirmation. I got the wire transfer notification." "You got a notification from a shell company," I said. "You were dealing with predatory lenders, Gavin. The kind of people who do not check deeds because they rely on intimidation to collect. But even they have bosses. Even they sell off debt when it becomes too risky." I looked toward the front door. It opened on cue. Marshall walked in. He was wearing a trench coat over his suit, carrying a thick leather briefcase. He looked like Judgment Day in human form. He stepped over the broken glass and spilled food, his expression unreadable. Gavin looked at Marshall, then back at me. "Who is this?" he demanded. "Another one of your old nursing home buddies." "This is Marshall Davis," I said. "He is my attorney, but tonight he is representing a very specific client." Marshall stopped in front of Gavin. He did not offer a hand. He placed the briefcase on the floor and opened it. He pulled out a single document stamped with a red seal. "Mr. Vance," Marshall said, his voice deep and resonant, filling the room, "I am here representing the primary creditor of your outstanding liabilities." "Creditor." Gavin frowned. "I do not owe you anything. I owe the syndicate. I owe the bank." Marshall shook his head slowly. "The syndicate sold your debt this morning, Mr. Vance. They considered you a high-risk asset. They were happy to unload your promissory note for 60 cents on the dollar." "Sold it to who?" Gavin asked, his voice trembling. "To a private holding company," Marshall said. "A company called Vance Holdings, LLC." Gavin blinked. "Vance Holdings. That is my name. I never set up a holding company." "No, you did not," I interrupted. "I did." I stepped forward, standing next to Marshall. "I bought your debt, Gavin. All of it. The gambling debts, the business loans, the personal lines of credit you maxed out, and that predatory loan you thought you secured against my house. I bought that too." Gavin looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. You bought my debt. You do not have that kind of money. You are a retired engineer living on a pension." "I am a retired structural engineer who owns the patent for the isolation bearings used in half the bridges on the West Coast." I corrected him, my voice hard. "I made millions before you were even born, Gavin. I just never felt the need to wear it on my wrist or drive it around town. I invested it. I saved it. And today, I used a fraction of it to buy you." I leaned down, getting right in his face. "You do not owe the mob money anymore, Gavin. You owe me. You owe Vance Holdings $500,000 plus interest and penalties. And as the sole proprietor of Vance Holdings, I am calling in the debt immediately." Gavin scrambled backward, crab walking across the floor away from me. "This is insane. You cannot do this. It is a conflict of interest." "It is business," Gavin, Marshall said coldly. "And you are in default. But that is actually the least of your problems." Marshall pulled another document from his briefcase. This one was a copy of the PDF I had stolen from Gavin's laptop, the forged loan application. "We reviewed the paperwork for the collateralized loan," Marshall continued. "It is a fascinating document. It lists Elijah Robinson as a co-signer and guarantor. It bears a signature that looks remarkably like Elijah's. It is his signature," Gavin shouted, desperate lies spilling from his lips. "He signed it. He forgot. He has dementia, remember? He signed it last week." I pulled the flash drive from my pocket. "I have the metadata, Gavin," I said. "I have the digital footprint. You created this file on your laptop at 3 a.m. 4 days ago. I was in a hotel room on the other side of the city. Unless I teleported, I could not have signed that." I held up the paper, pointing to the signature. "And you made a mistake. A structural error. You see, I always cross my A with an upward slant. It is a habit from drafting. It indicates elevation. This signature, it is flat. It is a flat line, Gavin, just like your future." Marshall stepped in, delivering the final legal blow. Forging a signature on a federally regulated loan application is a felony, Mr. Vance. Wire fraud is a felony. Identity theft is a felony. And since the amount exceeds $100,000, you are looking at a mandatory minimum sentence in federal prison. Not county jail, federal prison. Gavin stared at the paper. His mouth worked silently like a fish out of water. The reality of his situation was crashing down on him. He was not just broke. He was not just caught. He was owned. He owed $500,000 to the man he had tried to kill, and the government was about to lock him away for trying to steal it. But I signed it as power of attorney. Gavin whispered, his voice barely audible, a last gasp of a dying argument. I have power of attorney. He is incompetent. No, you do not, I said. You never had it. You tried to get it. You tried to force me. You tried to drug me. But you never got the signature. And the doctor you bribed, the one who was supposed to sign the competency hearing tomorrow. He is currently answering questions from the medical board thanks to a call Marshall made this afternoon. Gavin slumped. The fight went out of him. His shoulders collapsed and he looked small, pathetic. He looked at Jasmine, who was watching him with horror. Jasmine, tell them, he pleaded. Tell them I did it for us. Tell them we needed the money. Jasmine did not move. She stared at her husband as if seeing him for the first time. She saw the monster beneath the suit. You did not do it for us, Gavin, she whispered. You did it for you. Gavin turned back to me, tears streaming down his face. Tears of self-pity. Dad, please, I can work it off. I can pay you back. Do not send me to prison. I have a son. Think of Leo. Do not say his name, I roared. My voice echoed off the high ceiling, shaking the crystal chandelier. Do not let his name cross your lips. You used him as a hostage. You locked him in a room. You terrified him. You forfeited your right to be a father the moment you chose money over his safety. I stood up straight, adjusting my cuffs. You are going to prison, Gavin. And when you get out, if you ever get out, you will still owe me every cent. I will garnish your wages. I will take your tax returns. I will take every dime you ever make until the day you die. You wanted to be a part of the Robinson family. Well, now you are. You are my indentured servant. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. The police were arriving. Not the corrupt officers Gavin might have hoped for, but the state police called in by Marshall with a packet of evidence that included attempted murder, fraud, and extortion. Gavin began to sob loud, ugly, heaving sobs. It was the sound of a man who realized he had dug a hole straight to hell and pulled the ladder down with him. I looked at Marshall. Thank you. Marshall nodded, closing his briefcase. Pleasure doing business with you, Elijah. The front door burst open. Blue uniforms flooded the foyer. There he is, I said, pointing at Gavin. That is the man who tried to kill me. As they hauled Gavin up, handcuffing him roughly, I felt no joy. I felt no triumph. I felt only a cold, hard satisfaction. The structure of his lies had collapsed. The demolition was complete. But there was still one more pillar to address. One more person who had stood by and watched the foundation crack. I turned to Jasmine. She was shaking, hugging herself, her eyes wide with terror. She knew she was next. She knew that in the court of Elijah Robinson, there was no immunity for accomplices. The police dragged Gavin out the door, his screams fading into the night. I walked over to my daughter. The room was quiet now, save for her weeping. Daddy, she whimpered, reaching out a hand. I did not take it. We need to talk, Jasmine, I said, and this time you are going to listen. The red and blue lights of the police cruisers faded into the distance, taking the chaotic noise of Gavin screaming with them. The silence that rushed back into the foyer was heavy and suffocating. It was not a peaceful silence. It was the vacuum left after a demolition. I stood alone in the center of the room, surrounded by the shattered remnants of the party, the broken glass, and the spilled wine staining the hardwood floors I had laid down 40 years ago. But I was not entirely alone. Jasmine was still there. She had collapsed onto the floor near the fireplace, her expensive dress pooled around her like wilted petals. When she realized Gavin was truly gone, she let out a sound that was half sob and half gasp. She crawled toward me on her hands and knees. It was a pathetic sight. My daughter, the woman who had walked around this house like a queen just an hour ago, was now dragging herself across the floor like a beggar. Daddy, she wept, reaching out to grab the hem of my trousers. Please, you have to listen to me. I was so scared. You do not know what he was like. I looked down at her. I tried to find the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders. I tried to find the teenager I taught to drive, but all I saw was a stranger in a stolen dress. Get up, Jasmine, I said, my voice flat. Have some dignity. She shook her head, clinging tighter to my leg. He forced me, Daddy. He said he would hurt me if I did not go along with it. He said he would hurt Leo. I did it to protect us. I hated every minute of it. I wanted to tell you. I swear I wanted to call you, but he was always watching me. Her tears were abundant, soaking into the fabric of my pants. They were the tears of a child caught with her hand in the jar, not the tears of a woman grieving her sins. She was rewriting history in real time, painting herself as the victim of a tyrant she had willingly married. "You were scared?" I asked. "Yes, terrified," she sobbed. "He is a monster, Daddy. You saw him. You saw how he attacked you. Imagine living with that. Imagine trying to protect your son from that. I was a prisoner in my own home." I stepped back, breaking her grip. I walked over to the large flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace. Gavin had installed it to watch sports while he ignored his son. Now it would serve a different purpose. "You say you were a prisoner, Jasmine. You say you were forced. You say you wanted to warn me." I pulled my phone from my pocket. I opened the app connected to the hidden camera I had installed in Leo's backpack, the camera I had used to monitor my grandson's safety while I was in exile. I cast the video feed to the television screen. "Let us look at the evidence," I said. The screen flickered to life. The angle was low, shooting up from the floor where Leo had left his backpack in the living room 3 days ago. The timestamp read Tuesday, 7 p.m. It was the night before I left. Jasmine looked at the screen and her face went slack. She stopped crying instantly. The fear in her eyes shifted. It was no longer the fear of a victim. It was the fear of a criminal who realizes the jury has just walked in. On the screen, Gavin was pacing the living room. He was holding a wrench. "I am going to loosen the bolts tonight," Gavin said on the video. "Top landing, just enough so it gives when he puts weight on it." And there on the sofa sat Jasmine. She was not cowering in fear. She was not crying. She was not looking for a phone to call the police to warn her father that her husband was planning a murder. She was painting her fingernails. The camera focused perfectly on her face. She looked bored. She blew on her wet nails, examining the color with a critical eye. It was a bright, cheerful red. "Make sure it looks like an accident," Gavin Jasmine said on the screen without looking up. "We cannot have an investigation. If the insurance company gets suspicious, they will hold the payout. And I need that money for the remodel. I hate this kitchen." I paused the video. The image froze on Jasmine's face. She looked calm. She looked annoyed by the inconvenience of murder, not horrified by the act itself. The silence in the room was absolute. The only sound was the hum of the television. Jasmine stared at her own image. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. There was no defense against this. There was no spin she could put on this reality. "You were not scared, Jasmine," I said, my voice trembling with a rage that felt like molten lead in my veins. "You were bored, Daddy," she whispered. "Don't call me that," I snapped. "A father protects his children, but a child also protects her father. You sat there 5 feet away from a man planning to kill me, and your biggest concern was the kitchen remodel." I walked toward her. She scrambled backwards, scuttling away from me until her back hit the wall. "You could have sent a text," I said. "You could have whispered a warning when you passed me the salt at dinner. You could have called the police anonymously. You could have done anything at all, but you did nothing." I pointed at the frozen image on the screen. "Fear paralyzes Jasmine. But greed makes you comfortable. Greed makes you complicit. You did not hold the wrench. You did not loosen the bolts, but you turned off the lights so he could work. You are not a victim. You are the getaway driver." "It was not like that," she stammered, but the conviction was gone from her voice. "We needed the money. You have so much, Daddy. You are sitting on millions, and we were drowning. It wasn't fair." "Fair." I laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You think fairness is waiting for your father to die so you can pay off your husband's gambling debts? You think fairness is locking your son in his room so he does not warn me?" I looked at her hands. Her nails were still painted that same bright red, the color of betrayal. "You wanted the house," I said. "You wanted the money. You wanted the life you thought you deserved without working for a single day of it. Well, congratulations, Jasmine. You are about to get exactly what you deserve." I walked to the front door and threw it open. The night air rushed in cold and biting. "Get out," I said. Jasmine looked at the open door, then back at me. "What?" "Get out of my house. Get out of my life." "But where will I go?" she cried, standing up, her legs shaking. "Gavin is gone. The accounts are frozen. I have no money. I have no car. It is the middle of the night." "I do not care," I said. "Daddy, you cannot do this. I am your daughter. I had a daughter once," I replied, feeling a tear finally escape my eye. She was sweet. She loved to draw. She cried when she stepped on a bug. I do not know who you are, but that little girl died a long time ago. She died the day you decided my life was worth less than a kitchen renovation." Jasmine looked at me, searching for a crack in the armor, searching for the soft-hearted father she had manipulated for years. She found only stone. "You are disinherited, Jasmine. Marshall has already filed the paperwork. You get nothing. Not the house, not the insurance, not a penny. The trust is locked. The locks on this house will be changed within the hour." She took a step toward me, her face twisting into ugliness. "You are a cruel old man," she spat, showing her true face at last. "You are going to die alone in this big empty house, and you will deserve it." "I would rather die alone than live with a snake," I said. She walked past me, clutching her arms around herself, shivering in the cold night air. She stepped out onto the porch. She looked back one last time, expecting me to call her back. I slammed the door in her face. I locked the deadbolt. Then I engaged the security chain. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door and listened. I heard her scream, a sound of pure frustration. Then I heard the click of her heels fading down the driveway. She was gone. I turned back to the empty room. It was messy. It was broken. But it was clean. The rot had been cut out. But my work was not done. There was one piece of the puzzle left. The most important piece. Leo. My grandson was still upstairs. He was still locked in his room, a prisoner of his parents' war. He was the only innocent thing in this wreckage. And I had to save him. I walked up the stairs, my legs heavy but my purpose clear. I had dismantled the monsters. Now I had to rebuild the survivor. I reached Leo's door. I saw the heavy padlock Gavin had installed on the outside. A padlock on a child's bedroom door. The sight of it made me want to kill Gavin all over again. I went to my tool belt, which I had left in the hall closet. I pulled out a pair of bolt cutters. I snapped the lock with a single squeeze of my hands. I opened the door. Leo was sitting on his bed, hugging his knees. He was trembling. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with terror. "Is Daddy mad?" he whispered. I walked over and sat on the bed. I pulled him into my arms. He felt so small, so fragile. "Daddy is gone, Leo," I said softly. "He is not coming back. And neither is Mommy." Leo looked at me confused. "Where did they go?" "They went away because they did bad things," I said. "But you are safe now. You are with Grandpa. And I am never going to let anyone lock this door again." Leo buried his face in my shirt and began to cry. I held him, rocking him back and forth. We were alone in the big house, just an old man and a little boy. But for the first time in years, the foundation felt solid. However, the night was not over. Gavin had thrown one last grenade before he was dragged away. He had screamed something about the dark web, about my identity. I looked at Leo sleeping in my arms. I knew the fight for our physical safety was over, but the fight for our future was just beginning. Gavin thought he had sold my identity. He thought he had doomed me. He didn't know that Elijah Robinson was just a name I wore like a coat. He didn't know about the man underneath, the man I had been 30 years ago, and when he found out, it would be the final nail in his coffin. The handcuffs clicked tight around Gavin's wrists, cutting into his skin, but the sound did not seem to register with him. He was thrashing against the grip of the two officers, his face a mask of sweat and blood from where his nose had met the floor. He looked like a cornered rat, feral and dangerous. Most men in his position would be begging for a lawyer or crying for mercy. But Gavin was not most men. His narcissism was a terminal disease, and even as he was being dragged toward the door of the house he had tried to steal, he needed to believe he had won something. He needed to leave a scar. "Wait!" Gavin screamed, digging his heels into my hardwood floor. "Wait. I have something to say to the old man." The officers looked at me. I nodded once. Let him speak. I wanted to hear his final venom. I wanted to drain the poison completely so the wound could finally start to heal. They stopped dragging him, but they did not loosen their grip. Gavin straightened up as best he could with his hands cuffed behind his back. He spat a glob of blood onto the floor and grinned. It was a jagged, broken smile. "You think you are so smart," Elijah, Gavin rasped. "You think you protected your assets. You think buying my debt makes you the winner. But you forgot one thing. Information is currency." He laughed, a wet hacking sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. I did not just forge your signature on that loan application, he said, his eyes wide and manic. I made copies of everything in your desk before you changed the locks. Your social security number, your birth certificate, your old tax returns. I took it all. So what I asked, my voice calm, you committed identity theft. Add it to the list of felonies. Oh, it is more than that, Gavin sneered. I did not just keep it. I sold it. 2 days ago, while you were playing hide and seek in a hotel room, I went on the dark web. I sold your full identity package to a Russian syndicate specializing in synthetic fraud. They paid me $50,000 in crypto. He leaned forward, his eyes burning with hate. By tomorrow morning, your credit score will be 0. They are opening accounts in your name all over the world. They are laundering money through your profile. They are taking out loans you cannot track. You might keep the house, Elijah, but you are going to spend the rest of your miserable life fighting the IRS and the FBI. You are a ghost. I erased you. Marshall stepped forward, his face grim. That is a federal crime, Mr. Vance. You just confessed to international cyber trafficking. I do not care, Gavin shouted. I am going to jail anyway. But at least I know that while I am rotting in a cell, this old man is going to be destitute. I sold your soul, Elijah, and there is no buying it back. I looked at Gavin. I looked at the triumphant gleam in his eyes. He really believed it. He believed he had delivered a fatal blow from the grave of his own ambition. He thought he had stripped me of my name and my financial existence. I started to laugh. It was not a loud laugh, it was a low rumble deep in my chest. It was the laugh of a man watching a child try to knock down a skyscraper with a plastic hammer. Gavin frowned. Why are you laughing? You are ruined. I stopped laughing and walked closer to him. I signaled for the officers to hold him steady. I wanted him to hear this. I wanted him to understand the depth of his failure. You sold the identity of Elijah Robinson, I asked. Yes, Gavin spat. Social security number ending in 4598. Date of birth, March 12, 1955. I sold it all. I shook my head slowly. Gavin, you really should have done your research. You lived in my house for 10 years and you never asked me about my past. You never asked me about the patent lawsuit of 1992. What are you talking about? Gavin demanded. 30 years ago, I invented a stress distribution system for high-rise foundations, I said. It was revolutionary. A massive construction conglomerate tried to steal it. They sued me. They harassed me. They threatened my family. My wife was terrified. We were being followed. Our mail was being opened. I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. To protect my family and my work, I entered a witness protection adjacent program for corporate whistleblowers. It was a different time. The laws were different. When the dust settled and I won the lawsuit, I made a choice. I legally changed my name. Gavin blinked. What? Elijah Robinson is an alias Gavin. It is a DBA, a doing business as. It is the name I use for my neighbors. It is the name on my library card. It is the name on the mailbox. But it is not my legal name. It hasn't been for 3 decades. I pointed to Marshall. Marshall knows my real name. The bank knows my real name. The IRS knows my real name. But you do not know it. And neither do the Russians you sold that information to. I saw the confusion spreading across his face. But I saw your tax returns. I saw your social security card. You saw decoys, I said. I keep a set of dummy documents in the desk for exactly this reason, in case someone breaks in case someone tries to steal my life. That social security number you sold, it belongs to a man who died in 1980, the tax returns. They are fabrications I use to test accounting software. I leaned in so close I could smell the fear radiating off him. You sold them garbage, Gavin. You ripped off a Russian crime syndicate. You took their money and gave them a fake identity. Do you know what they do to people who scam them? They do not file lawsuits. They handle things internally. The color drained from Gavin's face so fast he looked like a corpse. His triumphant smile vanished, replaced by a mask of absolute horror. He realized what he had done. He had not destroyed me. He had painted a target on his own back. No, he whispered. That is a lie. You are lying. Marshall stepped in, opening his briefcase. He pulled out a redacted birth certificate and a court order stamped 30 years ago. It is a matter of public record if you know where to look, Marshall said. Mr. Robinson legally ceased to exist in a financial capacity in 1993. His assets are held under a trust in his legal name which you have never seen. The identity you sold is a ghost. Gavin's legs gave out. The officers had to hold him up. He looked at me with a new kind of terror. Not the terror of prison, the terror of a man who knows he is being hunted by wolves he created. "You killed me," he whimpered. "You just killed me. They will find me in prison. They will kill me." "I did not kill you, Gavin," I said, stepping back. "You killed yourself. You let your greed blind you. You thought you were stealing from a senile old man. You didn't realize you were trying to rob a fortress that was built to withstand siege." I looked at the officers. "Get him out of my sight." Gavin did not scream as they dragged him away this time. He did not fight. He went limp, his feet dragging across the floor. He was broken, completely and utterly broken. He stared at the floor, his mind racing with the realization that he was trapped between the law and the criminal underworld, and he had no allies left in either. I watched him go. I watched the man who had tormented my family for years disappear into the night. When the door closed, the silence returned. But this time it was different. It was cleaner. Marshall closed his briefcase. "That was brutal, Elijah," he said quietly. "Effective but brutal. Is it true about the Russians?" I looked at Marshall. "The name change is true," I said. "The dummy documents are true. The Russians, I don't know. Maybe he sold it to a low-level hacker. Maybe he sold it to a cartel. It does not matter. What matters is that he believes it. He needs to live with that fear. He needs to look over his shoulder every day for the rest of his life. That is his punishment." Marshall nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "You always were thorough." I walked over to the window. I saw the police car pulling away, its lights flashing against the dark trees. Gavin was gone. The threat was neutralized. But the house felt empty, cold. I turned away from the window. "We have work to do, Marshall," I said. "I need to file for custody. Leo is with a social worker tonight. I want him home by tomorrow." Marshall checked his watch. "It is late, Elijah. The courts are closed. Then wake a judge up," I said, my voice firm. "I have evidence of child endangerment. I have evidence of abuse. I have a house that is safe and paid for. I am not letting my grandson spend one more night wondering if he is loved." Marshall pulled out his phone. "I will make the call." I walked to the kitchen. I needed water. My throat was dry. My hands were finally starting to shake now that the adrenaline was leaving my system. I sat down at the small kitchen table. I looked at the empty chair where Gavin used to sit and pontificate about his greatness. It was just a chair now. I had won. I had saved my life. I had saved my assets. But as I looked around the silent house, I realized the cost. My daughter was gone. My son-in-law was in prison. My grandson was traumatized. Victory tasted like ash. But then I remembered the toy car. I remembered Leo's small hand pressing it into mine. I remembered his trust. He saved me. A 7-year-old boy had the courage to save me when no one else would. I stood up. I washed my face in the sink. I was not done. I had to rebuild. I had to turn this house back into a home. I had to make sure that when Leo walked through those doors again, he didn't see the scene of a crime. He needed to see a sanctuary. I grabbed a trash bag from under the sink. I walked into the living room. I started picking up the broken glass. I picked up the ruined food. I picked up the pieces of the party that never happened. I worked through the night. I scrubbed the floors. I threw away the furniture Gavin had bought. I opened the windows to let out the smell of his cologne. By the time the sun came up, the house was clean. It was empty, but it was clean. I stood on the porch watching the sunrise. The nightmare was over. Now the work of living could begin. The fluorescent lights of the family court waiting room hummed with a low, buzzing frequency that grated on my nerves. It had been 2 weeks since the night of the party. 2 weeks since Gavin was dragged away in handcuffs and Jasmine was expelled from the sanctuary she had taken for granted. I sat on a hard plastic chair, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Next to me, Marshall tapped away on his tablet, his face a mask of professional detachment. But I was not detached. My stomach was churning. Today was not about money. It was not about real estate. It was about the only thing that mattered. Leo. The doors swung open and Jasmine walked in. She looked nothing like the woman who had begged on my floor. She had pulled herself together. She wore a modest blue suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She was flanked by a public defender, a young woman who looked overworked and tired. Jasmine saw me and her eyes narrowed. There was no remorse there, only calculation. She was here for one reason, and I knew it wasn't maternal instinct. It was leverage. We entered the courtroom. The judge was a stern woman with gray hair and glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked at the file in front of her, then at us. "This is a hearing for emergency custody of the minor Leo Vance," the judge stated. "The mother is petitioning for the return of the child." Jasmine stood up. Her performance was Oscar-worthy. "Your Honor," she said, her voice trembling just the right amount, "my father is vindictive. He has used his wealth to destroy my family. He had my husband arrested on trumped-up charges, and now he is trying to steal my son. I made mistakes, yes. I stood by a bad man. But I am a mother. Leo needs me. I have no money. I have no home. If I have custody, I can apply for the support I need to give him a good life." There it was, the truth hidden in plain sight. She needed custody so she could apply for support. She needed Leo because Leo came with a check. She didn't want the boy. She wanted the child support payments she thought I would be forced to pay. She wanted access to the trust fund she assumed I had set up for him. She was using her son as a meal ticket. I looked at Marshall. He didn't even stand up. He simply slid a thick binder across the table toward the judge. "Your Honor," Marshall said, his voice calm and bored. "We are not here to debate the character of Mr. Robinson. We are here to discuss the fitness of Ms. Vance. The binder contains school records showing Leo missed 40 days of school in the last year. It contains medical records showing he has not seen a dentist in 3 years, despite the family living in a $2 million home." Jasmine gasped. "That is a lie. We were busy." "We were." Marshall ignored her. "But more importantly, Your Honor, we have video evidence submitted to the district attorney in the criminal case against her husband. Evidence that shows Ms. Vance was present while her husband abused the child physically and emotionally. Evidence that shows her ignoring her son's distress to focus on cosmetic concerns." The judge opened the binder. She flipped through the pages. Her expression darkened with every turn. She picked up a flash drive attached to the back cover. "We have viewed the footage," Marshall continued. "It shows the father locking the child in a room for days at a time. It shows the mother painting her nails while the child screams for water. It shows a pattern of neglect so profound it borders on depravity." Jasmine screamed. "I was scared. I told you I was scared of Gavin." "Fear does not prevent you from unlocking a door when your husband leaves the house," Ms. Vance, Marshall said, cutting her off. "You had hours alone with the boy. You never let him out. You never comforted him. You left him in a cage because it was convenient for you." The judge slammed the binder shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Ms. Vance, the judge, said, her voice icy. "In my 20 years on the bench, I have seen many bad parents, but rarely have I seen a parent who uses their child as a shield for their own greed." "But I need him," Jasmine wailed, the mask slipping completely. "I have nothing. I need the money to take care of him." "You need a job," the judge snapped. Petition denied. Full guardianship is awarded to the grandfather Elijah Robinson, effective immediately. Ms. Vance, you are granted supervised visitation once a month pending the completion of a parenting course and a psychological evaluation. And let me be clear, if you miss one appointment, if you show up late, if you try to use that boy for money again, I will strip your rights permanently. Jasmine collapsed into her chair sobbing, but they weren't tears for Leo. They were tears for the lifestyle she had just lost forever. She looked at me across the aisle, her eyes filled with hate. "I hope you rot," she hissed. I stood up, buttoning my jacket. I walked past her without looking down. "I am not the one rotting, Jasmine," I said. "I am the one rebuilding." I walked out of the courtroom and into the sunlight. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. Leo was safe. He was legally mine. No one could ever lock him away again. But there was one more thing I had to do. One final tie to cut. I drove back to Maple Street. The house stood there grand and imposing, its white pillars gleaming in the afternoon sun. It was a masterpiece of design. I knew the load-bearing capacity of every beam. I knew the R value of the insulation in the walls. I had poured my soul into this structure, hoping it would be a sanctuary for generations of Robinsons. But as I walked up the driveway, I felt nothing. The house was not a home anymore. It was a crime scene. Every room held a memory of betrayal. The kitchen where Gavin poisoned my tea, the living room where Jasmine ignored her son's cries, the study where I had to hide under a desk like a fugitive. It was a beautiful tomb. And I did not want to live in a tomb. I met the realtor on the porch. She was a woman I had known for years, a shark in her own right, who knew the value of the land. "Are you sure, Elijah?" she asked, looking at the magnificent structure. "This is your legacy. You built this with your own hands." I looked at the front door, the wood I had sanded myself. "My legacy is not wood and brick," I said. "My legacy is standing next to me, waiting in the car. This is just a building, and it has bad bones, not the structure. The memories. The walls have ears, Sarah, and they have heard too much hate." "Sell it," I said. But I did not sell it to a developer. I did not sell it to another Gavin who would tear it down to build condos. I sold it to the city, specifically to a non-profit organization that provided housing for displaced families. I sold it for $2 million a record for the neighborhood because I included the adjacent lots I still owned. It was a power move. Gavin had wanted to sell it to pay off criminals. I sold it to help victims. I walked through the empty rooms one last time. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood. I touched the banister, the one Gavin had loosened. I had fixed it the night before, tightening the bolts until the wood groaned. It was solid again, safe. I went to Leo's room. The door was open. The sunlight streamed in through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I remembered finding him here terrified and alone. "Goodbye," I whispered to the ghosts of the life I thought I would have. I walked out the front door and locked it for the last time. I handed the keys to Sarah. "It is done." I walked down the steps and got into my truck. It was a new truck, a heavy-duty pickup capable of hauling timber and towing trailers. It was a working man's vehicle. Leo was sitting in the passenger seat. He was looking out the window, his face solemn. He was clutching the plastic police car in his hands, rubbing his thumb over the siren light. "Where are we going, Grandpa?" he asked, his voice small. "We are going home, Leo," I said. "A real home." We drove for 2 hours, leaving the city behind. The concrete and steel gave way to green fields and rolling hills. The air changed, becoming cleaner, sharper. We turned off the highway onto a gravel road that wound through a forest of pine and oak. The trees opened up to reveal a farmhouse sitting on a hill overlooking a lake. It was not a mansion. It was a simple, sturdy house with a wraparound porch and a tin roof. It needed work. The paint was peeling and the fence was leaning, but it had good bones. I parked the truck. We got out. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of the wind in the trees and the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. Leo looked around, his eyes wide. "Is this ours?" "It is," I said. "I bought it yesterday. It needs fixing. But I think we are good at fixing things, aren't we?" Leo looked at the house, then at the lake. He walked down to the water's edge. I followed him. He picked up a flat stone and skipped it across the surface. 1 hop, 2 hops, 3. He turned to me. A slow, shy smile spread across his face. It was the first time I had seen him smile in months. It was not a guarded smile. It was genuine. It was the smile of a boy who realized he didn't have to be afraid anymore. "Can we get a dog?" he asked. I laughed, a sound that felt rusty in my throat but good. "We can get 2 dogs," I said. "And a boat. And maybe even build a treehouse." Leo looked at the plastic car in his hand. He looked at the lake. He drew his arm back and threw the car as hard as he could. It sailed through the air, the red and blue lights catching the sun one last time before it splashed into the deep water and sank. "Why did you do that, Leo?" I asked gently. "I do not need it anymore," he said, looking up at me. "I have you." I put my hand on his shoulder. He leaned into me. We stood there watching the ripples fade on the water. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over our new world. The past was buried in the city under layers of concrete and lies. Here there was only earth, water, and the future. We walked back up the hill to the farmhouse. I had tools in the truck. I had wood to cut. I had a foundation to inspect. I was 70 years old. I had lost my daughter. I had lost my home. But as I opened the door to the farmhouse and watched my grandson run inside laughing, I realized something. I had never been richer. 5 years is a long time in the life of a structure. Wood weathers, stone settles, and foundations finally take their permanent set. It is also a long time in the life of a man. I was 74 years old now. My hands were stiffer, my knees complained when the rain came in, but my mind was sharper than ever. I sat on the porch of the farmhouse watching the morning mist burn off the lake. The property had transformed under my care. The fences were straight, the barn was painted, and the garden was thriving. It was a place of peace. A car turned onto the gravel road, breaking the silence. It was not a truck or a delivery van. It was a rusted sedan, the muffler dragging slightly as it navigated the bumps. I did not move. I just watched it approach, sipping my coffee. I knew who it was before the door opened. I had been expecting this visit for 5 years. Jasmine stepped out. She looked 20 years older. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by a faded waitress uniform and a cheap coat that was too thin for the autumn chill. Her hair, once perfectly styled, was pulled back in a messy knot, showing streaks of gray she could no longer afford to hide. She walked toward the porch, her steps hesitant. She looked at the house, then at me. There was no arrogance in her eyes anymore, only hunger. "Daddy," she said, her voice raspy. I set my coffee cup down on the railing. "Hello, Jasmine." She stopped at the bottom of the steps. She did not try to come up. She knew the boundaries. "I did not think you would see me," she said, wrapping her arms around herself. "I am sitting on my porch, Jasmine. It is a free country." She looked down at her worn shoes. "Gavin is still in prison. He got denied parole last month. He tried to blame me for everything at the hearing." I said nothing. I just watched a hawk circling overhead, hunting for field mice. "I am working," she continued, the words rushing out now. "I am waiting tables at a diner in the city, double shifts. My feet bleed every night. I live in a studio apartment above a garage. It has mold." "That sounds difficult," I said, my voice neutral. It was not sympathy. It was simply an acknowledgement of physics. Action and reaction. Cause and effect. "I need help, Daddy," she whispered. "I am drowning. I have medical bills. I have back taxes. I just need a little push, just to get back on my feet. I am not asking for a mansion. I just need $5,000. $5,000. The exact amount she had watched Gavin steal from my wallet years ago without saying a word. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had sat on a sofa painting her nails while her husband planned to snap my neck. I looked for anger, but I found none. The anger had burned out years ago, leaving only a cold clarity. "You want money?" I asked. "Yes. Please. I am your daughter." "Does that mean nothing?" "It means we share DNA, Jasmine. It does not mean I share my wallet. You made your choices. You chose the quick buck over the hard work. You chose the lie over the truth." I learned my lesson. She cried, tears cutting tracks through the cheap powder on her face. I swear I learned. I know the value of $1 now. "Do you?" I asked. "Or do you just know the pain of not having one? There is a difference." I stood up. The wood of the porch creaked under my boots. "Wait here." I went inside. I went to my desk and opened the top drawer. I took out a white envelope. It was already sealed. I had prepared it a long time ago, knowing this day would come. I walked back out and handed it to her. She took it, her hands trembling, her eyes lighting up with the old greed. She thought it was a check. She thought I had finally broken. She tore it open. Her face fell. It was not a check. It was a single sheet of paper. "What is this?" she asked, staring at the document. "It is a job application," I said. She looked at me, confusion warping her features. "A job application. For a cleaning company." "Vance Industrial Cleaning," I said. "I bought the company 3 years ago. We have a contract with the city to clean the subway stations. It is hard work, Jasmine. It is dirty work. You work nights. You scrub concrete. You empty trash. But it pays $18 an hour and it offers health insurance after 6 months." "You want me to be a janitor?" she whispered, horror dawning in her eyes. "You have millions, and you want me to scrub toilets. I want you to learn what it feels like to build a life with your own hands," I said. "I started as a laborer, Jasmine. I dug ditches before I designed bridges. You skipped the digging. You went straight to the spending. Now you have to go back to the start." I pointed to the paper. "Fill it out. Take it to the address at the bottom. Ask for Mr. Henderson. Tell him Elijah sent you. He will give you an interview. He will treat you like anyone else. If you work hard, if you show up on time, if you keep your head down, you will earn a living. You will earn dignity." "Dignity," she spat, crumbling the paper in her hand. "This is humiliation. You are mocking me." "No, Jasmine," I said, my voice hard. "Giving you money would be mocking you. It would be telling you that you are too weak to survive on your own. Offering you a job is the most respectful thing I can do. It is an opportunity. Take it or leave it." She looked at the crumpled ball of paper in her fist. She looked at the house she would never inherit. She looked at the father she had tried to destroy. For a moment I thought she would throw it at me. I thought she would scream and curse and storm away, but she didn't. The fight went out of her. Her shoulders slumped. She realized that there was no other safety net. The bank of Dad was closed forever, but the factory of Elijah was hiring. She smoothed out the paper, pressing it against her leg to flatten the wrinkles. She folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. $18 an hour, she asked, her voice hollow. "And benefits," I added. She nodded. She did not say thank you. She did not say I love you. She just turned around and walked back to her rusted car. She got in and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust that settled slowly on the driveway. I watched her go. I did not know if she would take the job. I did not know if she would stick with it. But for the first time in her life, the outcome depended entirely on her. That was the only gift I had left to give. "Grandpa." I turned. Leo was standing in the doorway. He was 12 years old now, tall for his age, with shoulders that were starting to broaden. He held a fishing rod in one hand and a tackle box in the other. His eyes were bright, clear, and free of the shadows that had haunted them 5 years ago. "Who was that?" Leo asked. "That was your mother," I said. I had never lied to Leo. I never would. Leo looked at the dust settling on the road. He did not ask if she was coming back. He did not ask why he didn't see her. He knew the story. He knew the truth. "Is she okay?" he asked. "She is starting over," I said. "Or at least she has the chance to." Leo nodded, processing this with a maturity beyond his years. "Are we going fishing?" "We are," I said. We walked down the hill to the edge of the lake. The water was calm, a mirror reflecting the blue sky and the towering pines. We launched the small aluminum boat and motored out to the center of the lake. We sat in silence for a while, casting our lines, watching the bobbers dance on the ripples. It was a comfortable silence, the kind shared by two men who trust each other implicitly. Leo reeled in his line, checking his bait. "Grandpa, do you remember that police car?" I smiled. "The one you threw in the lake?" "Yeah. I was thinking about it the other day. I shouldn't have thrown it. It was important." I reached into my tackle box. I moved aside the lures and the spare line. I pulled out a small waterproof bag. Inside was the plastic police car, battered, waterlogged, and missing a wheel. "I agreed," I said, handing it to him. "That is why I came back for it the next morning." Leo took the car, his eyes widening. "You swam for it." I waited, I corrected. It was muddy and cold. "But I could not let it stay down there, Leo." "Why not?" he asked, turning the toy over in his hands. "It is broken. It does not work anymore." "It is not about whether it works," I said, looking out across the water. "It is about what it represents. That car is the reason we are here. It is the reason we are safe. It is a reminder, Leo." "A reminder of what?" "That the smallest things can carry the heaviest weight," I said. "That $5 can be worth more than $2 million if it buys you the truth. And most importantly, it is a reminder that you were brave. You saved us, Leo. Not me. You." Leo looked at the car, then at me. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Can we keep it?" "We can," I said. "In fact, I built a spot for it." When we went back to the house later that afternoon, carrying a stringer of bass for dinner, I showed him. In the living room on the mantel above the fireplace, I had built a small glass case. It was lit by a small LED spotlight. I took the muddy, broken plastic car and placed it inside. It looked out of place in the rustic farmhouse, a piece of cheap urban debris in a sanctuary of wood and stone. But to me it was the most valuable thing in the room. It sat there, a monument to survival, a testament to the day the foundation cracked and the day we decided to build a new one. I put my arm around Leo's shoulders. "You know, Leo, people spend their whole lives trying to build wealth. They want big houses, fast cars, and expensive suits. They think that is what makes them strong." I looked at the car, then down at my grandson. "But real strength isn't what you own. It is what you are willing to defend. And real wealth isn't the money in the bank. It is knowing that when you go to sleep at night, the people under your roof are safe, and they love you for who you are, not what you can give them." Leo looked at the case. I like our house, Grandpa. I squeezed his shoulder. Me too, son. Me too. Outside, the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows across the land I owned free and clear. My daughter was scrubbing floors in the city. My son-in-law was staring at the bars of a cell. But here in this house, there was light, there was truth, and there was peace. And that was a legacy worth more than any building I had ever designed. This journey taught me that we often confuse price with value. Gavin and Jasmine chased millions and lost their souls, while a $5 plastic toy saved my life because it carried the truth. I learned that real family is not defined by DNA, but by who stands beside you when the foundation cracks. True wealth isn't the balance in your bank account, it is the peace of knowing you are safe in your own home. Build your life on integrity, not greed, because when the storm comes, only the truth remains standing. If you enjoyed this story of justice, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, what is the most valuable lesson you've learned from a difficult family situation?